commitments that we heard yesterday was frankly inspiring. I think it's fair to say there is a new beginning as the world is moving towards the actions necessary to keep 1.5 degrees as the limit on the warming of the planet. Governments and markets, we learned yesterday, are really tuning into the urgency. But more than that, they're recognizing the remarkable opportunity, the economic opportunity that we have here. And that's what today is about. The world's largest market in history is opening before our own eyes right now. And it's going to create millions of high-quality, good-paying jobs around the world, especially in countries that seize this agenda. Today is going to be about that vision. We're going to hear from governments, entrepreneurs, community and labor leaders about how they see the future. But before we dive in, I'd like to share with you a quick summary of discussions that we had on the margins of the summit. We had so many countries obviously wanted to be able to participate, but running a virtual summit encompassing 12 time zones is difficult, and it's clearly a challenge just to include the numbers that have been included directly in the summit itself. So we listened to, in 2 listening sessions, I heard from representatives of 63 countries at the ministerial level. We heard from oil-rich countries, biodiversity-rich countries, and from small islands and landlocked countries who face particular challenges. We had countries from every conceivable region of the world take part in these listening sessions: the Balkans, Scandinavia, Central Asia, the Middle East, South Asia, South America, West Africa, the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, from Armenia to Zambia, literally. I left those roundtables, frankly, feeling excited, encouraged. On the one hand, many of the countries, as you can imagine, these are countries that produce less fractions of 1% of the emissions, but they are the greatest impacted by the effects of climate. And many of those countries express concern about the inadequacy of global action to date to meet the goals of Paris. Many noted that mitigation thus far has not been sufficient to keep us on track to hold on to a safe temperature. Many countries, including the most vulnerable, are already experiencing unprecedented impacts: floods, hurricanes, drought, fires, and more. And many, which was very encouraging, had extremely bold plans of their own to confront these challenges, but they lacked the capacity, they lacked the resources to be able to implement those plans. There is polite but obvious frustration that was manifested by many who have contributed so little to the crisis, but who have to deal with so much of the consequences. And at the same time, participants enthusiastically reported, one after the other, of the very significant and exciting measures that they're taking, efforts they're individually undertaking to tackle the climate crisis, even though, because of the fractions they represent, their best efforts are turned towards adaptation and resilience, because they can have a minimal impact on the mitigation, yet they are still engaged in mitigation. And I think we should all, the bigger nations, be inspired by their efforts. Many countries emphasized the critical role of COP26 in Glasgow, the critical role in keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius as the limit of the warming that we face. And because we know that we are already at 1.2 degrees, we have a very small margin to play with. Many of these countries reported that they have submitted or are working on enhanced NDCs. And I think every larger nation should be inspired by that. And many have adopted net zero goals. It was particularly interesting to hear how they are dealing with heavy industry, something we have not heard a lot about, but which is one of the toughest areas for mitigation. Many participants highlighted their national adaptation efforts, such as early warning systems, rapid response efforts, flood protection plans. But I'm sure as you hear me saying those things right now, everyone will say to themselves, is that really what they're reduced to? An early warning system, a flood protection, a response effort? Many of them are coordinating regionally to pursue shared interests. And many echoed President Biden's themes that action on climate is an opportunity for job creation, and that it is important to leave behind communities that are dependent on fossil fuels. Now, we have heard from a carbon negative country, countries that have successfully decoupled economic growth from carbon emissions. We heard from countries with extensive forest cover that offer themselves up with a nature-based solution. We heard from leaders in carbon storage, from countries issuing green bonds, and countries focusing on gender-responsive approaches and the participation of indigenous communities. And it should be inspiring to the major economies that many of these countries are, all of them, embracing passionately climate action, and they contribute far less than 1%, as I said a few minutes ago. Grenada reminded us that words are not enough, that the rule book being finished in Glasgow is not enough, that what is critical is the actions, the outcomes, particularly of the largest emitters in the world. We, all of us in the last day and a half, and now today, will be able to focus on real solutions to this challenge. And I'd close by saying that what came out of these conversations with the 63 nations not able to take part in this part of the summit was that they hear the language from leaders about an existential threat. And indeed, for many people on the planet today, the climate crisis is an existential threat. But they, like the young woman who spoke yesterday, know that we are not yet behaving as if it is an existential threat. That is the challenge of today. And the message that we hope leaps out from today's panels is that no one is being asked for a sacrifice. This is an opportunity for better health, for great jobs with extraordinary opportunities of the future to grow our economies, and to provide for much greater security for our nations. The roundtables contributed significantly to this sense of urgency. And it is a sense of urgency that really mandates that we raise our ambition as we head to Glasgow. I have the great pleasure now of introducing my friend Michael Bloomberg. During his career of private sector innovation and his public service as mayor of New York City and as a philanthropist, Mike recognized early on that tackling the climate crisis was going to require action from every level of society, from town halls to governor houses, C-suites to mom and pop shops. And when the previous administration withdrew the United States from the Paris Agreement and retreated from global leadership, Mike Bloomberg leaned in. He founded America's Pledge and helped launch a national movement to rally American cities, states, businesses, universities, and tribal councils to declare that we in the United States, that we are still in the Paris Agreement and climate action. Now, in his role as a UN Special Envoy on Climate Ambition and Solutions, Mike uses that experience to help all of us try to move the world to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank President Biden and his administration for bringing us all together. Let me also thank the national leaders taking part, including everyone who came to the summit armed with ambitious new goals for cutting emissions. The simple fact is, we can't wait for COP26 to take action. That's why this gathering is so important. We have a chance, right here today, to demonstrate what strong leadership really looks like. Yes, it's about setting ambitious goals, but it's also about bringing everyone from every part of the world together and working as a team to meet them, not just in government, but in the private sector too. Now, I want to emphasize something that I hear all the time from mayors and from CEOs too. They say, we're ready to do more. We want to do more, but we need more help. Sometimes they need more funding, sometimes they need more authority, and sometimes they need regulatory changes. You won't always agree with them, of course, but I urge you to listen to them, because if you look at the data, cities and businesses hold the key to defeating climate change. They are responsible for the vast majority of emissions, so helping them and incentivizing them to take action really is critical. The more action they take, the faster we can make progress. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we've been working to help cities raise their ambitions and help spread solutions that work around the world. And our company has been working to help the market move more capital to green projects in every global region by bringing greater transparency to climate risks and opportunities. The Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures sets standards that help companies manage risks and that empower investors to direct more capital to companies that are leading the way. We can't beat climate change without a historic amount of new investment, and that will only happen if governments, investors, and business leaders have the information they need to make smart decisions. Working with partners, Bloomberg Philanthropies has also helped retire over 60% of all coal-fired power plants in the U.S., and half of the EU's coal plants, too. Coal plants are the single biggest contributor to climate change, and they spew toxic, deadly pollution into the air. The good news is, clean energy is increasingly cheaper than coal in much of the world. That's one reason why more cities, states, and businesses are committing to reach net zero emissions, including our company, which is on track to reach net zero by 2025. There's a lot of good work happening in both the public and private sectors, just not enough. We have to do more, faster, to cut emissions. And by acting boldly and urgently, we can build a lot of momentum going into COP26 this November. We're all in this together, so thank you for coming together for this summit. All the best.
Thank you, Mike. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Brenda Mallory, who is the new chair of the Council on Environmental Quality. Brenda has dedicated her career to using the law to fight for environmental justice and legal reform inside and outside of government. And we're all delighted, as the president is, that she is part of his team.
Thank you, Secretary. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be part of the discussion on ensuring that all communities and workers benefit from our actions to address climate change. President Biden's approach to environmental justice is guided by a couple of core beliefs. First, that every single person has a fundamental right to drink clean water and breathe clean air. And second, that for too many people, we have failed to deliver those protections. This is true in the United States, but we know that it is also true in many other parts of the world. Correcting these historic wrongs is not going to be easy, and it requires a long-term commitment. But acknowledging a need for change is a critical first step. I was confirmed by the United States Senate just last week as the newest chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, but I've immediately gotten to work joining the rest of the president's team that has made environmental justice an everyday focus over the 3 months since his inauguration. There are 3 ways I'm going to be working every day to help the president achieve his environmental justice goals. First, I chair the White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council. This cabinet-level group exists to make sure that the entirety of the federal government is working to address injustice in frontline and fence-line communities and make a positive difference in the lives of everyday people. Second, I'm thrilled that the first ever White House Senior Director for Environmental Justice is part of our team at the Council on Environmental Quality, and I know we'll achieve great things together. And third, the newly formed White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council brings together 26 national environmental justice leaders from across the country to advise CEQ and the Interagency Council on the steps we need to take to get it right. I look forward to receiving the recommendations from this group. Turning now to an introduction of an important partner we have, my friend Peggy Shepard is a nationally recognized leader who has devoted her life to advancing environmental equity. She is the founder and executive director of We Act for Environmental Justice in Harlem, New York. She has graciously agreed to co-chair the Advisory Council and is joining us here this morning. It is my pleasure and honor to present Peggy Shepard to you. Thank you.
Well, good morning, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Kerry and distinguished guests from around the world. Thank you, Brenda Mallory, for the kind introduction. Good morning to all of you who are present today for this historic convening. I'm Peggy Shepard, co-founder and executive director of We Act for Environmental Justice, based in Harlem, New York City, and I am proud to serve as co-chair of the historic and new White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. You know, last night I met with my fellow council members as we discussed our recommendations to the Biden administration to advise the implementation of key cornerstones of his commitment to centering environmental and climate justice and equity into all government policies. I think of the phrase, look at what they do, not at what they say. And I'm startled to realize that I am at this convening today because President Biden is acting on what he said and committed to do. And together we're building a model of collaboration between government and communities, seizing the profound opportunity to accelerate the pace of action on reducing the impacts of climate change on this country, on our economy, on the most vulnerable communities, and on the workers of this country who need good family-sustaining jobs. And the administration is transitioning our economy from fossil fuels to a clean energy future that sustains the livelihoods and ecosystems on which the world depends. We must build back better, but with justice and a keen sense of our failed history of discriminatory policies that has been systemic. We will build back better by centering investment in the frontline communities that have borne the brunt of the environmental degradation that has scarred the landscape of urban and rural America. President Biden is uplifting the voices, experiences, and solutions of the communities most affected by environmental injustice and climate change. We're working to achieve a rejuvenated America where all communities have access to clean air, clean water, safe schools, and healthy homes. And you know, for me, this Earth Day has been one of optimism. For decades, many of us in the environmental justice movement have won David and Goliath type victories. We've raised the specter of this nation's failures, and we have begun to be heard. And it's our opportunity to get it right, to put people before profits, to center equity instead of advantage, to engage and empower those who are struggling with poverty, oppression, and racism, giving them an opportunity to not only be a part of the solution, but also reap its benefits. We have the power to leave no community behind. And as Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai said, today we're faced with a challenge that calls for a shift in our thinking so that humanity stops threatening its life support system. We're called to assist the earth to heal her wounds and in the process heal our own, indeed to embrace the whole of creation in all its diversity, beauty, and wonder. Recognizing that sustainable development, democracy, and peace are indivisible, that is an idea whose time has come. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. That was excellent. As you can see, I'm looking forward to partnering with Peggy because she's full of great ideas and she's a great voice. Thank you, everyone.
How do we reach global net zero emissions? The path forward requires doing more of what we know works now, while investing in the critical technologies we'll need for tomorrow. Creating and scaling game-changing innovations that will enable 100% clean electricity, produce and use zero carbon fuels, decarbonize industry, aviation, shipping, trucking, build net zero communities, advance climate-smart agriculture, remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and make us resilient. A better world is possible. It starts by investing in tomorrow's technologies today.
I now have the pleasure of introducing Secretary Jennifer Granholm and Secretary Gina Raimondo. Jennifer understands on a personal basis the economic opportunity that climate action provides, and she may understand that better than a lot of other folks because her work as governor of Michigan and her work now as Secretary of Energy has centered on advancing the urgent climate agenda through the creation of high-quality middle-class jobs. And Gina, for her part, has established herself as an innovator in the private sector and in public service. She established the first venture capital firm in Rhode Island and then served as its first governor, female governor. She's bringing the same entrepreneurial spirit to the Commerce Department now as secretary, and she wants that department to engage the private sector in the cause of tackling climate crisis. Secretary Granholm.
Thank you, sir, and welcome everyone to day 2 of the Leaders Summit on Climate, which of course is concluding a monumental week of international cooperation and collective action. So these commitments are amazing. And President Biden convened this summit for a simple reason. And that reason is that we have to raise our collective ambitions around climate change. By the end of this decade, we need renewables deployed at scale so that reliable, affordable, clean energy reaches people in the most populated valleys and in the remotest mountains, across the hottest deserts and the coldest tundra. We need fearless innovation to bring down the costs of batteries, to commercialize carbon capture, to make blue and green hydrogen market ready. And perhaps most of all, we need a mindset that overcomes resistance to change. Many are stuck on the status quo, and maybe they are insistent that we can't reach our goals. But an old proverb says, when the winds of change blow, some build walls, others build windmills. So, fellow windmill builders, let's push back on doubt and fear. Climate disasters worldwide tell us that the scariest thing that we can do is nothing at all. Let's prove we can in this moment. And we'll all gain when we succeed, starting with jobs. We are looking at a $23 trillion global market in the clean energy transition by 2030. 23 trillion at a minimum. And that means that we all can remake our economies and we can build new businesses and put millions and millions of people to work. So President Biden believes this will be an historic advance in prosperity and quality of life. And that's why his American Jobs Plan, our American Jobs Plan, calls for massive investments in clean energy research, development, and deployment. That's why we're mobilizing American ingenuity like never before. So over the coming weeks, we at the Department of Energy will be announcing new goals for bold, achievable leaps in next generation technologies, starting with hydrogen, carbon capture, industrial fuels, and energy storage. We'll marshal our 17 national laboratories, our universities, and our private sector to unlock major breakthroughs. So we've already announced a goal of cutting the price of solar in half yet again by 2030. And next, we'll start lowering the cost of clean, renewable hydrogen by 80% before 2030, making it competitive with natural gas. We're going to slash battery cell prices in half again and reduce the need for critical materials, making electric vehicles affordable and maybe even cheaper than gasoline vehicles. And we're going to dramatically reduce the cost of industrial atmospheric carbon capture while we're ramping up incentives for large-scale efforts across the world as well. This is our generation's moonshot. Less than a decade after President Kennedy declared our nation's choice to go to the moon, we planted an American flag on that cratered surface, and today we choose to solve the climate crisis. Imagine what we can do by the end of this decade. And imagine if the entire world participated. What if we did this together? All of us. For too long, this climate conversation has been viewed as a zero-sum game, one of trade-offs, the climate or the economy. No longer. Going big on our ambitions means that we're going to create jobs for millions of people, construction workers, project managers, engineers, technicians, so much more. That means we can all do right by our people as we do right by the planet. We can lift up communities that have been knocked down. We can make good on moral debts owed to those bearing the burdens of fossil fuel pollution. This is an exciting moment. And our speakers today are going to shed light on the great potential that's at hand. We're going to start with somebody who understands the power of major investment and cutting-edge innovation better than almost anybody on the planet, Bill Gates. Bill observed years ago that power comes not from knowledge kept, but from knowledge shared. He was referring to business leadership. But how apt is that at this moment in the clean energy transition? So guess who's here to drop some knowledge on us now? Please welcome Bill Gates.
It's an honor to be here with all of you today. I especially want to thank President Biden and Secretary Kerry for reestablishing America's leading role on climate change. This is a promising moment. Climate activists, and young people especially, are bringing amazing energy and attention to this issue. They are demanding action, and rightly so. And governments around the world are meeting those demands with ambitious commitments. In Paris, 6 years ago, here today, and again in Glasgow later this year. But climate change is an incredibly complex issue. And using just today's technologies won't allow us to meet our ambitious goals. The reason is that almost all of our zero carbon technologies are more expensive than their fossil fuel counterparts. To provide all the benefits of the modern lifestyle to people around the world, we need new zero carbon products that are just as affordable, that have what I call a green premium of zero. Now, It will be hard to create those products, but we can do it if we invest in innovation and build the infrastructure for the transition to a clean economy. This will require doing three things at once. First, we need to develop and deploy breakthrough technologies that allow us to eliminate emissions throughout the physical economy. Second, we need to tap the power markets to fund and deploy these innovations, for example, by finding creative ways to finance technologies and by leveling the playing field so they can compete with fossil fuels. Third, governments and corporations need to adopt policies that will make it faster and cheaper to make the transition, and leaders will need to reward those who take difficult steps. To accomplish these three things, international cooperation will be essential. Mission innovation is one exciting example of governments working together to expand and coordinate their investments in clean energy research. I'm also working with partners on an exciting new program we call Breakthrough Energy Catalyst. It will raise money from governments, philanthropy, and companies to make the large capital investments needed to bring down the cost of emerging technologies. By taking steps like this to create the financing structures that will allow green products to succeed, we can build new industries and companies that support communities around the world with good jobs while making the transition to the clean economy. I hope to work with many of you here on this endeavor. Finally, even as we accelerate innovation to reduce climate impacts, we have to address the climate impacts that are going to come because of the heating that's already taken place. This means accelerating agricultural innovation so that subsistence farmers can withstand the shocks that come with more unpredictable weather. The UAE, United Kingdom, and United States are announcing a new initiative on this topic today, and they're inviting other countries to join their growing coalition in support of these goals. If we take all these steps together, I believe we can avoid a climate disaster. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill, for recognizing the urgency of the moment and for answering this call to action. We are so fortunate to have you as a warrior in this fight with us. So as we create these new energy technologies, the Biden administration is committed to helping every country embrace them. So over the course of this week, we announced several new collaborations with our international partners. On Wednesday, we joined the United Kingdom and others to launch the Global Power Sector Transformation Consortium, which is there to help power system operators around the world increase renewable energy capacity and to decrease energy waste, all the while keeping the lights on. We also unveiled the responsible use of small modular reactor technology, also known as FIRST, and that supports our international partners in harnessing advanced nuclear energy. And then to move decarbonization forward in the industrial sector, we have joined LEAD IT, which is the leadership group for industry transition initiative that's led by Sweden and India. We're also thrilled to announce our plans to host the 2022 annual meetings of Mission Innovation and the Clean Energy Ministerial in the United States. We started those two great partnerships under President Obama to engage over 30 of our partner countries involved in clean energy innovation. And today, we're saying to everyone that we are firmly back. So our commitment to international collaboration animates this summit too, obviously. Today, we're going to hear from 6 heads of state from countries that have been world leaders in specific clean energy technologies. So they're going to tell us how they built these new industries. They're going to tell us what rewards they now enjoy. First, I would love to introduce Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen of Denmark. The Danes obviously pioneered the wind industry, starting with onshore capacity and more recently moving into offshore. Wind is a core component of their transition away from fossil fuels, and we're so glad to have this longtime global leader in clean energy technology represented today. Welcome, Prime Minister.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine that you are flying across the North Sea. Hundreds of wind turbines appear on the horizon. As you get closer, you spot an island creating clean electricity, clean fuels, green innovation for millions of European households. That's our Danish vision of the world's first energy island. And it's not just something to imagine. Denmark will soon make it a reality. Already today, almost 50% of Denmark's electricity is powered by wind. And we have plans to build even more. Up next is turning green electricity into green fuels. This will solve major challenges for all of us. Emissions from trucks, planes, and ships. And it will also create a lot of new jobs, plenty of green jobs, offshore, onshore, in ports, in test and research facilities, in industry. We will leave no one behind. In just 2 years, the world's leading container shipping company, Maersk, will launch its first carbon-neutral container ship. As governments, we should support this. That's what Denmark aims to do with the new mission Innovation on Shipping, in close collaboration with the US. Denmark also supports the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. This is another area where we need to increase research and development. Taking the next steps in innovation will not be easy, but I am confident that we can do it. Why? Because we have done it before. Denmark turned our largest fossil power company into the world's most sustainable energy company, Ørsted. We have decided to end all Danish oil and gas production in the North Sea by 2050. Today, Denmark has more jobs in green energy than in fossils, and the private sector is on board. We have formed climate partnerships with all parts of Danish business. All of Denmark is now united in reaching our target, a 70% cut in emissions by 2030. Thank you, President Biden, for bringing the United States back into the Paris Agreement. Let us continue our shared journey into a greener and more sustainable future. I can assure you that we in Denmark stand ready to do our part.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Frederiksen. We all applaud the announcement of the world's first energy islands. Very exciting. And all of us in the Biden administration are really thrilled to join you as the co-leads of that mission innovation effort to decarbonize global shipping. Bravo. So it's now my pleasure to introduce His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum of the United Arab Emirates. Welcome, Your Highness.
فخامة الرئيس جو بايدن، أصحاب السمو والفخامة والمعالي السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أود في البداية التوجه بالشكر لفخامة الرئيس جو بايدن على دعوته.
At the outset, I would like to thank President Biden for his kind invitation to participate in this important summit to discuss the challenges of climate change and to consider how we can turn it into future opportunities for the next generation. I would like to affirm the commitment of the United Arab Emirates to work closely with the United States and the international community and the private sector, and to make a radical change in regards to climate change. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, although the United Arab Emirates is one of the largest oil exporting countries in the world, we have made a strategic decision 15 years ago to invest in renewable energy and in low carbon technology. Today, we operate two of the largest solar plants in the world, and they're among the largest in the world. And we decided to establish a third plant that would be the largest independent solar plant in the world. We in the UAE today host the International Renewable Energy Agency, and we also invested successfully in 70 countries in renewable energy projects around the world by providing concessional loans to these countries, because we believe that this type of renewable energy represents the best future for humanity. And also, the UAE is considered to be the first in the Middle East to pioneer carbon capture and storage technology. And our oil sector is considered to be the lowest carbon emitter in the world. Your Excellencies, as Mr. President Biden and Mr. Bill Gates have already mentioned, I am pleased to announce that the UAE will be partnering with a group of champions to launch the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate. This is a new initiative to support research and development and innovation for food systems over the next 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is not a temporary concern. It is rather a global challenge that is ongoing. We must unite our efforts to safeguard the planet for the future generations, or else risk paying heavier costs in the future. Today, we are before a new global opportunity under the leadership of President Biden, and we join our hands to work together to unlock the major opportunities born out of this pressing challenge of climate change. Thank you, and peace be upon you.
Well, thank you, Your Highness. Agriculture is, in fact, such a critical piece of the climate action puzzle. So the United States, thanks the UAE for accelerating the research and development necessary to lower emissions from that sector. And the United States is proud to join you as an inaugural member of the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate Initiative. And we also, by the way, very greatly value the UAE's partnership through the Clean Energy Ministerial as we work to raise gender diversity in clean energy professions. So now I would like to introduce Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. Israel has been, as we know, a global leader in technology innovation, and clean energy is certainly no exception. Not only has Israel developed critical technologies for climate change mitigation, They're also showing us how to build resilience against impacts like water scarcity. Their focused investments in Israel have actually, by showing us, lowered the cost of climate action for countries all over the world. And through collaborations like the U.S.-Israel Energy Center, we hope to drive that progress even further. Welcome, Prime Minister Netanyahu.
I thank President Biden and his team for hosting this important virtual summit. I've known President Biden for some 40 years. I know the strength of his commitment for stronger action on climate. This is a commitment we in Israel fully share. I pledge to reduce Israel's carbon footprint and to completing a successful transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy by 2050. We've already made crucial progress in two specific areas. In coal, we've substantially reduced our dependency. In fact, Israel is a global leader in cutting coal consumption. By 2025, that's 4 years from now, barring unforeseen circumstances, Israel will no longer be burning coal, period. In solar energy, over the last 5 years, we've increased our generation from 2% to almost 10% this year. And we're committed that by the end of this decade, renewable energy will be providing over a third of Israel's electricity. The challenge we still face is solar energy storage. My government is working to overcome this challenge and make Israel a global leader in energy storage. This will enable us to revolutionize our use of renewable energy. Hundreds of Israeli startups are working on this project and on related issues. These companies have already received billions of dollars. They'll receive more, because I'm convinced that Israeli science and Israeli ingenuity will enable us to play our part in the global transition to a net zero carbon economy. In water, too, Israel is making a big difference. We've shown the world how to use water more efficiently in agriculture through pioneering developments in drip irrigation, hydroponic agriculture, and the use of artificial intelligence. Israel is a world leader in water purification and recycling, as well as in desalination. About 93% of Israel's wastewater is purified, and 86% is recycled for use in agriculture. These are very big numbers. And cooperation in the fields of water and renewable energy are also an integral part of our new cooperation with the UAE and Bahrain. So not only are we working to end dependency on fossil fuels and finding solutions to the climate crisis, but we're helping to cement Arab-Israeli peace. And that bodes well for the entire region, for the entire world. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Very encouraging. I'm now very pleased to introduce President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya. As a nation that's on the front lines of climate change, Kenya has taken up the mantle of leadership on both innovative adaptation methods and expanding access to clean energy. They've showcased for the world how it's possible to leapfrog a carbon-intensive industrialization strategy and land right on sustainable development strategies. So here to tell us about those efforts, President Kenyatta.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And at the very start, let me congratulate President Biden for once again leading the United States to re-engage the global community of nations on matters environment and climate change. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank him and his administration for recognizing Kenya's leading role on the African continent in matters environment as well as innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is no longer a future crisis, but rather a present one. Like the COVID-19 pandemic, it is a defining development and security challenge that we must address today. The reality is hard to ignore, and the consequences of our inaction are indeed dire. Many of our countries are experiencing frequent extreme weather patterns with devastating impacts on economies, livelihoods, and ecosystems. There is a lot that we can do as individual countries to mitigate climate change. And allow me at this moment to highlight just a few examples of what we in Kenya have done in this regard. Kenya has updated their nationally determined climate contributions that were submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change in December of 2020 and we commit to continue to reduce our emissions by 32% by the year 2030, against the business as usual scenario. In addition, we are also in the process of developing a greenhouse gas emission strategy for 2050, and we will be submitting the report to the United Nations Framework for Convention and Climate Change before COP26 later this year. In our journey to the 2050 target, Kenya intends to complete its transition to renewable energy, and clean energy already accounts for about 90% of total electricity supply in Kenya, and we intend to increase this to 100% by the year 2030. As you may know, Kenya is a pioneer in geothermal energy on the African continent, and indeed holds the 5th position globally. Our geothermal potential is great, and the amount currently tapped is actually less than 10%. And this presents huge investment opportunities across the technology value chain, as well as huge opportunities for employment of young Africans across our country. We're also the first country in the world to pioneer new geothermal wellhead technology, which ensures the immediate power supply at low costs, even before the associated infrastructure is in place. Kenya is also home to one of the largest single wind farms on the African continent, in addition to significant yet underexploited potential for solar-based power generation. Ladies and gentlemen, to meet the energy needs of the rural communities, we have also deployed digital technologies using an innovative pay-as-you-go mobile money credit facility, better known locally as M-Kopa. And these communities have switched from kerosene to solar for lighting and to power appliances such as televisions and refrigerators. Kenya is already a leader within the sub-Saharan Africa in developing and distributing clean cook stoves. There is, however, still more work to be done to provide domestic solutions for clean cooking services for 80% of Kenyans who continue to depend on biomass for cooking. To address the clean energy cooking gap, we have committed to achieve a 100% clean cooking under the SDG 7 by the year 2028, 2 years ahead of the UN target date. To promote innovation, our institutions of higher learning and research have established climate technology incubation centers. And we are also working closely with business leaders as well as the academia to develop appropriate sustainable waste management and circular economy innovations. Let me conclude by also taking this opportunity to raise a concern regarding financing. Most developing countries are struggling to finance climate mitigation and adaptation actions. A recent UN adaptation gap report estimates that the current annual adaptation costs in developing countries to be about $70 billion US, and this is expected to rise to about $140 to 300 billion by the year 2030 if no action is taken today. We therefore need to increase our ambition at 2 levels. First, all countries should take the bold measures to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the next 10 years. And second, the better off countries, working in collaboration with our private sectors, should support developing countries secure the financial resources required to implement climate adaptation programs. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot win this fight against climate change unless we globally cooperate to fight it together. Let us therefore all commit to redouble our efforts now and not wait for future tipping points. Let us all act in concert to protect our shared destiny, and let us, in the spirit that the United States has shown in rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, all aim to bequeath our children a better future. I thank you all.
Thank you, President Kenyatta. I love the focus on geothermal. I know all of us at the Department of Energy are really proud of our partnership that our laboratories have been able to forge with Kenya through the Power Africa initiative. Here's a moment where we can share information because we need to do more on geothermal in the U.S. too. So thank you for that. Our next speaker is Prime Minister Erna Solberg of Norway. Norway's all in on a clean and electrified future. They're investing in technologies to decarbonize the extraction and the use of fossil fuels. They're leading a global market for electric vehicles, and they're investing in clean energy innovation and deployment all over the world, not to mention in global efforts to reduce deforestation. That is exactly the kind of big, all of the above thinking that the world needs now. So welcome to you, Prime Minister Solberg.
So friends and colleagues, first let me congratulate the US on its new NDC. We need your leadership and ambition to drive innovation and change. We quickly need development and use of new technologies. And we cannot rely on the market only. Carrots and sticks do help technologies pass their tipping points. And a high price on carbon is critical. So governments and business must team up in new ways to drive innovation and to create jobs. And let me mention a few examples. Norway is moving at a record pace towards zero-emission road transport. More than half of all new cars in Norway are electric. Tax exemptions and other incentives, such as reduced road tolls, has changed consumer preferences. And Norway is a leader in ocean-based climate solutions, harnessing the vast potential identified by the Ocean Panel. And as a significant maritime nation, we aim to lead in low and zero emission solutions for global shipping. Our ship owners have taken on to order nothing but zero emission ships starting in 2030. And at home, we switch our ferries to electric, and we will halve emissions from domestic shipping and fisheries by 2030. And we recently opened the first offshore areas for wind power, so we might connect to the Danish island afterwards. Norwegian companies work at home and abroad, including in the US, where the Empire Wind Project will power more than 1 million New York homes. And we make large investments in carbon capture and storage development. Last year, we launched the Longship project. Our goal is a complete CCS value chain: CO2 capture, transport and storage, and excess capacity can store more CO2 from Europe. And lastly, we need innovation to stop deforestation. Norway has made available high-resolution satellite imagery of all tropical forests. This will help to improve management and verify performance. And Norway is proud to be part of the LEAF Coalition, an innovative model to mobilize private capital for countries that cut deforestation. So we need a massive push for development and use of innovative technologies. And we need knowledge and solutions to spread across borders. And I believe that together we can work to limit temperature increase by 1.5 degrees and be in line with the goal of the Paris Agreement.
Great. Thank you, Prime Minister Solberg. Norway's enthusiastic attitude towards so many critical technologies is infectious. I hope you infect us all. And that's why really the Biden administration is so excited today that we're also announcing and launching the Net Zero Producers Forum with Norway, as well as Canada and Qatar and Saudi Arabia. This means that together we are committed to crafting pragmatic net zero strategies that oil-producing countries all over the world can look to for their own transitions. Very exciting. Finally, I am pleased to welcome Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong of Singapore. Singapore is leading the way on groundbreaking efforts to reduce emissions produced by major cities. They have made major progress in developing green net zero energy buildings, particularly for hot and humid climates. And they're showing the world how to design sustainable cities for the future. So welcome, Prime Minister.
I would like to thank President Joe Biden for convening this summit. It's a welcome signal of U.S. leadership and commitment to a multilateral climate solution, underlined by the U.S. rejoining the Paris Agreement. Although Singapore is a small island state, we will contribute our share to the climate agenda. Singapore was among the first 20 countries to submit our long-term strategy to the UNFCCC. This year, we launched the Singapore Green Plan 2030, our roadmap towards sustainable development and net zero emissions. Our strategy goes beyond meeting emission caps or implementing our carbon tax. To overcome our small size and lack of resources and achieve our emission reduction goals, Singapore must also innovate and use technology extensively. For instance, we have very limited renewable energy options. Nevertheless, we plan to quadruple solar energy production by 2025. We are opening one of the world's largest floating solar energy systems, which will offset 33,000 tons of CO2 annually. Another major concern for our compact and dense city is rising urban temperatures. To moderate this, we are using computer modeling for more climate-responsive urban design, experimenting with special cooling paint on buildings, and planting 1 million more trees. As a financial hub, Singapore can help the global push for sustainability through green finance, fintech, and capability building. We've launched a $2 billion Green Investments Program. This will support the development of carbon trading and services, sustainability consultancies, and environmental risk management. One promising area is emissions verification, including using new technology to measure the carbon footprints and monitor abatement commitments of businesses. Singapore is happy to share our experience in all these areas. We've incorporated climate and sustainability in the Singapore-US Third Country Training Program. And as country coordinator for ASEAN-US Energy Cooperation, we will work closely with the US to support our region's clean energy transition. We look forward to working with the US and all countries to build a sustainable future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister. Singapore is certainly pushing the envelope in fascinating directions, from computer modeling for urban design, new technologies for emissions verification, all sorts of great stuff. But what's clear from these 6 heads of state is that there is really tremendous opportunity for investments in a broad range of clean energy technologies, not only to mitigate emissions and adapt our society to climate impacts, but to also boost our economies and create good-paying jobs for our citizens. I do want to thank each of our guests once again for highlighting these impressive technologies and investments that your countries are making in these technologies to inspire us and hopefully share with the world, for your commitment to spreading those technologies so we can all rise to this challenge of climate change together. And now, it is my great pleasure to turn this over to my friend, Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, for a look at the massive economic opportunity of the new energy economy, with help from speakers representing the private sector and civil society. Secretary Raimondo.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. Like Jennifer, I'm a former governor of the state of Rhode Island, and I am President Biden's Commerce Secretary. And as Secretary Granholm said, we all are tired of the old view that we have to make a trade-off between jobs and the environment, meeting the needs of climate and the economy. And so as the Commerce Secretary, I am joining forces with all of you to show leadership in our commercial sector as we look to the private sector for innovations, as we've all been talking about, and new technologies that are necessary in order for us to continue to move forward in our fight against climate change. It's been amazing to listen to what is happening all around the world, and it is thrilling to be here on President Biden's team to be leading again with all of you in the world on climate. Raising our innovation ambition is going to be what makes it possible to raise the world's climate ambition. And that is what today is all about. And government cannot do it alone. We need the private sector. We need private sector innovation. We need entrepreneurialism. And we need academic research and academic research institutions to play a huge role in uncovering and developing new technologies and innovations, investments that can unlock massive economic opportunities as well. Already in 2020, global investments in clean technologies crossed the $500 billion mark. And in the coming decades, the new energy economy will open multi-trillion-dollar markets for clean technologies, especially driven by fast-growing emerging economies. As many of you have said, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to develop and produce advanced technologies, export them around the world, and speed global net zero transitions, which will ultimately, as many of you have said, lead to the creation of millions of jobs, millions of good, high-paying union jobs. So it is my great pleasure this morning to introduce a series of academic and private sector innovators who will be necessary to allow all of us to achieve our goals. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, to frame the climate challenge and the central role of innovation in reaching net zero emissions. Dr. Birol's leadership has led a transformation and modernization of the International Energy Agency to become the global hub for collaboration on clean energy transitions. He chairs the World Economic Forum's Davos Energy Advisory Board and is widely recognized as a top global leader on the world's energy scene. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Birol.
Distinguished guests, I would like to commend President Biden for convening this summit within 100 days of taking office. And I welcome the commitments to reduce emissions announced by so many countries. It is clear that the level of commitment to fight climate change has never been higher. This is excellent news. But I will be blunt. Commitments alone are not enough. We need real change in the real world. Right now, the data does not match the rhetoric, and the gap is getting wider and wider. Our latest estimates for global emissions in 2021, this year, are a warning for humanity. Emissions are on track for their second largest increase in the history. We are not recovering from COVID in a sustainable way, and we remain on a path of dangerous levels of global warming. Yet, there are grounds for optimism. Electricity generated from renewables, solar, wind, and others, will break records this year, and the sales of electric cars will reach another record high. But getting to net zero emissions requires much more than that. we will need to transform our entire energy system. This means drastically cutting emissions from trucks, ships, and planes. We will also need to do the same for steel and cement factories, chemical plants, and in farming. We have today many technologies at our disposal: energy efficiency, solar, wind, electric cars, nuclear power, and many more. And we need to deploy these as quickly as possible. However, IEA analysis shows that about half the reductions to get to net zero emissions in 2050 will need to come from technologies that are not yet ready for market today. This calls for massive leaps in innovation across batteries, hydrogen, synthetic fuels, carbon capture, and many other technologies. On 18th of May, only a few weeks from now, the International Energy Agency will release a roadmap for how the global energy sector can reach net zero by 2050. Make no mistake, this is a Herculean task. Participants to this summit have used the occasion to make new announcements. Let me add one from the IEA. According to our upcoming roadmap, reaching net zero will triple clean energy investment opportunities over the next decade. This will generate millions of well-paid jobs and create the industries of the future. But our priority is to make sure these benefits reach as many people as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to work all together to achieve our goals and create a better future for all of us.
You remind us all of the urgency with which we must do this work. And it is a stunning statistic, really, to think that 45% of the emissions reduction we need to achieve must come from technologies which aren't fully developed today. So it's really a call to action for all of us and the innovators in our country to continue to push as it relates to new technology and innovation. Next, it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson, president of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, one of our country's leading research universities. Dr. Jackson, a particle physicist, has served as the chair of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and as a top scientific advisor to President Obama, who awarded her the National Medal of Science. She serves on the board of the Nature Conservancy and has had a truly extraordinarily distinguished career. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. It is a great honor to contribute to this summit. Universities such as Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute are crucial in developing and incubating the new technologies required for a net zero world. Nature has had billions of years to perfect the conversion of light into usable energy. At Rensselaer, we are reimagining photosynthesis, building on advances at the intersection of biotechnology and materials science to develop engineered photosystems. We envision using lipid nanoparticles, such as those used today to stabilize mRNA for vaccines, as a matrix for biomimetic components, able to generate hydrogen or capture electrons for electricity or fix atmospheric CO2 for the production of carbon-neutral fuels and chemicals. In energy storage, our researchers are looking beyond lithium to the use of more earth-abundant materials such as magnesium, potassium, calcium, or sodium, and using novel self-healing electrode designs to develop low-cost, safe, energy-dense, sustainable batteries. However, there is no innovation without innovators. Universities play the crucial role in educating the next generation of talent. To address the challenges of creating a clean energy economy, the United States and other nations must draw upon and develop the complete global talent pool, including women and minority groups historically underrepresented in science and engineering. Universities are the crossroads for collaboration across disciplines, sectors, geographies, and generations. And an integrative approach is required to decarbonize the many interconnected systems of our daily lives. Therefore, I am very pleased to announce that Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute is launching the Institute for Energy, the Built Environment, and Smart Systems in partnership with Siemens, Lutron Electronics, the international architecture firms HKS and Perkins & Will, and the Brooklyn Law School. The new institute, based in New York City, will use the most advanced digital technologies to drive decarbonization of urban environments at the systems level. It will model integrated transportation, communications, and supply chain networks. It will link architectural design, engineering, and a new approach to regulation to create infrastructure that is both net zero and climate resilient. It will use new materials, renewable energy systems, and sentient building platforms to maximize human health and well-being. We thank President Biden for convening this summit, and we look forward to the work ahead.
On your new institute. That's amazing. It's exactly the kind of research that's going to move this work forward. And we're thrilled that you are making this announcement at President Biden's summit this week. It's fantastic, and thank you for being with us. So now we're going to hear from some leaders focused on decarbonizing specific sectors of the economy, starting with renewable energy for the electricity sector. I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Danielle Murfield, who's with us this morning. She is the Chief Technology Officer of GE Renewable Energy, which is, of course, a leading U.S. company that invests in the next generation of clean technologies and obviously creates many jobs in the process of doing that work. Danielle is a member of the National Academy of Engineering. Dr. Murfield leads research and development at GE into exciting clean energy technologies such as offshore wind and energy storage. And on a personal level, when I was the governor of Rhode Island was home to America's first offshore wind farm, and we had the great pleasure of working with GE in doing that. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Murfield.
I'd like to start by thanking the Biden administration for convening this important summit, for its commitment to decarbonizing our energy sector, and for its strong support for innovation. The administration's right to focus on innovation as a key part of the solution to address climate change. From our founding, innovation has been the lifeblood of GE. That history of innovation led us to develop technology that delivers 1/3 of the world's electricity today. Innovation is key to our shared success. So we invest $1.5 billion annually in energy-related R&D, including at our Global Research Center in upstate New York, which is focused on breakthrough technologies. And across GE, we appreciate that success requires partnership. We're proud to collaborate with the Department of Energy, our national labs, and universities across the country to support innovation for the energy sector. Innovation in power generation and grid operation is enabling solutions to lower greenhouse gas emissions and secure a path to a low-carbon future. One example is GE's Haliade X, the world's most powerful offshore wind turbine in operation today. Just one rotation of its blades can power a home for 2 days. It will power the world's largest offshore wind farm in the UK and some of the first big offshore projects here in the US, including Vineyard Wind, which has already benefited from the improved permitting process under this administration. The Haliade X is complemented by our global onshore wind development efforts, where we've driven innovation for the US market as the largest supplier of onshore wind turbines in the country. We've commercialized new digital technology to optimize performance and even coupled renewable energy farms with energy storage to supply power when it's most needed. We're also pursuing innovative breakthroughs for the future. This includes partnering with the Department of Energy to pioneer manufacturing techniques, such as 3D printing of wind blades and towers to reduce logistics and materials costs. as well as developing superconducting generators for offshore wind that will help us generate even more power offshore. And unlike conventional generators, these don't require rare earth materials, helping secure our energy supply chain. Beyond generation, we're also working on innovative solutions for digitizing and modernizing the grid to ensure reliable delivery of electricity with improved security and lower operational costs. We know that for innovation to succeed, we must promote diversity in our thinking and ensure we tap the thoughts of many communities. To that end, the GE Foundation, our independent charitable organization, is announcing a commitment of up to $100 million to increase the diversity of young people in engineering. This program will provide underrepresented students hands-on exposure to engineering concepts and careers and ultimately award scholarships, developing the next generation of engineers focused on building a world that works. We look forward to partnering with the countries and customers represented here at the summit to support the energy transition and transform our global energy sector together. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to GE for your leadership. It is exciting to both innovate, create jobs, meet the needs of climate change, and move towards a more equitable workforce by providing opportunities for a diverse workforce. So thank you. In addition to producing renewable energy, a net zero transition will require transporting that power and using it across the economy, as we've heard from many of the world leaders this morning. We'll need to start building smart electrified systems all over the world. So I would now like to introduce Audrey Zeibelman, from Alphabet's Moonshot Factory. Audrey and her colleagues know a thing or two about this. She spent over 3 decades leading organizations with the goal of making power cleaner, more affordable, and more reliable. She was most recently the CEO of the Australian Energy Market Operator, and while in Australia, Audrey was a founding member of the Global Power System Consortium. She also previously was the chair of the New York Public Service Commission, where she oversaw the electric, gas, water, steam, and communications utilities in New York. Not an easy job. Welcome, Audrey.
Thank you. President Biden, Special Envoy Kerry, Secretary Armando, Secretary Granholm, and honored guests. It's an honor to be here today. As we all know, to achieve our carbon reduction targets, we must provide people worldwide with access to clean, affordable, and reliable electricity. As a 30-year veteran of the electric industry, today I'd like to talk about the vital role technology innovation and broad sector collaboration must have in achieving this goal. What most people don't understand is that the power system only works if the supply of electricity balances with the amount being used every moment of the day. This has always been a difficult engineering challenge, but it's becoming even more so as we decarbonize the grid. I have firsthand experience of this and of how climate change is only making this task harder. Just over a year ago, I was in the control room with my team working to keep the lights on during unprecedented bushfires. We were losing major parts of the system. The limitations on our modeling and visualization tools meant we had to act with incomplete information. Because it was all they had, our engineers relied on experience rather than accurate data to make critical decisions. We were successful. However, as we know from recent events in Texas and in California, this is not always the case. The greatest fear of an operator is the inability to keep the power on, especially when our communities are most vulnerable. It is possible to run reliable power systems on renewables, but we urgently need smarter investments and better software to make it work. That's why last year, Australia and other leading system operators formed the Global Power System Transformation Consortium, or the GPST. The GPST is designed to direct and combine research efforts and to share our learnings worldwide, especially with developing nations. I'm honored to formally announce today that the United States and the United Kingdom are joining the GPST, and grateful that U.S. Secretary of Energy Granholm and UK BEIS Secretary of State Kwarteng helped us launch the GPST consortium formally. I believe so strongly in the importance of integrating cutting-edge technology into grid design and management. I left the energy industry to join X, Alphabet's moonshot factory, to lead their moonshot for the electric grid and be a part of Alphabet's industry-leading work to combat climate change and build a greener economy. Our team has been working with partners to develop the tools required to move our grids out of the industrial age and into the age of intelligence. I look forward to working with GPST members, governments, and industry leaders to make the moonshot of a clean, affordable, and reliable electricity system worldwide a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you for that terrific presentation and your exciting announcement about GPST. And thank you for reminding us of the very real and dangerous consequences of not doing this work and not innovating with urgency. So last but absolutely not least, it is my great pleasure to introduce Anna Borg, who has a long and distinguished career in the energy sector. Anna is the president and CEO of Vattenfall, a Swedish multinational power company, which has been a leading innovator in using green hydrogen to decarbonize highly emitting industrial processes. Prior to that, she was the CFO of this company, and as I said, has a long and distinguished career in the energy sector. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Secretary, for the nice introduction. Thank you, President Biden and Secretary Kerry, for your leadership. With the United States now re-entering the global climate arena and the Paris Agreement, you can count on Sweden as a partner in this critical work. It is encouraging to hear that the United States is now joining the Lead It initiative. Vattenfall is one of the largest energy companies in Europe, with its origin and base in Sweden. A few years ago, Vattenfall embarked on a journey with a goal to enable fossil-free living within one generation. This is not our sustainability strategy, it's our business strategy, and it is sustainable. We are not just phasing out fossil emissions from our own operations, we are working in close partnerships with our customers to help them do the same. We have more than 100 years of experience of innovation and a large and growing portfolio of sustainable and fossil-free electricity. We believe we can drive innovation through electrification. 5 years ago, building on the Swedish heritage of cross-industry innovation, we began a partnership with leading mining and steel companies, LKAB and SSAB. Together, we created Hybrid, with the aim of producing the world's first fossil-free steel. The key is to replace the coal used in the existing steel-making process with hydrogen produced using fossil-free electricity. This is the biggest shift in steel-making industry in 1,000 years. Together, we have built a pilot plant in the Swedish town of Luleå, and this year it will produce the world's first fossil-free steel. Right now, we are taking the next step, a demonstration plant for large-scale production of iron sponge. This is no longer a vision, it's happening, and it has the potential to change the world. Hybrid is not the only initiative emerging from Sweden. There is a growing industry cluster around mining, steel, and new energy-intense businesses like battery production for electric cars. One of the main problems now is finding all the people needed to work in these industries and projects. The current technology development is dramatically driving costs down for CO2-free technologies. The single most effective tool in this transformation in Europe is the fact that there is a price for emitting CO2. This drives innovation. Vattenfall is partnering up to decarbonize also other sectors like refineries, transportation, mining and chemical industry. I commit to make sure that Vattenfall meets the targets in the Paris Agreement by phasing out fossil emissions from our operations and by enabling our customers to do the same. Transforming into a sustainable business is not only possible, It is the way to have a competitive edge in the future. And the future is not happening in 2050. All of us are creating it here and now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Vattenfall is doing amazing work. The thought of producing steel without reliance at all on fossil fuel is very exciting, and it's just one of the many innovations that your company and other companies are moving on. So that concludes the portion of this panel for the non-governmental speakers. I will simply thank you all for participating. Thank you for your work. And again, I think that what we just heard from the private sector is how important it is for this to be a public-private nonprofit partnership the entire way through if we are going to do the work that is required. So thank you all. And with that, I will turn it back over to Secretary Granholm.
Actually, I think we're turning it back over to Secretary Kerry.
Thank you. Thank you for a rapid turnover. Gina, thank you so much for your stewardship. And Jennifer, likewise, you both brought special energy, no pun intended, to this session. And we're deeply appreciative for it. In a few moments, President Biden is going to rejoin, and he will lead the last session and be here throughout it as we hear about the extraordinary possibilities of the new economy. But let me just say very, very quickly about the session we just heard. I've been at this for a while, and I've sat and listened to people in many different venues, but I have to tell you, this was exciting. This was energizing. It was incredible to listen to what the leaders of Kenya, Israel, Norway, UAE, Singapore, Denmark were telling us is happening now. And what was fascinating about that is that each of those countries are smaller than the 20 that are providing 81% of all the emissions. So if ever there was an underscoring of the challenge that we face here, there are exciting things happening, unbelievable things happening. But as Dr. Birol reminded us, as a community of nations writ large, we are not getting the job done. And what President Biden decided when he determined to have this summit was the key must be the raising of ambition. Country after country has stepped up, but the test is going to be not in the rhetoric, as Dr. Birol said. It's going to be in whether or not we really buckle down and get this done. It's not a lack of capacity. It's an apparent lack of willpower in some places to move as fast as we are able to move. The bright future that waits us on the other side of this transition is what President Biden wants to focus on as the last session of this gathering. So without further ado, we want to get to that. I thank everybody for taking part in this particular session. And in a moment, we're going to listen to the economic benefits and jobs, the once-in-a-generation opportunity that we have to transition our economies and to do better for our people as well as for the planet itself. So we look forward to that session. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Well, welcome back. And thank you all again, all the world leaders who've joined us. Thank you for joining. And John, thank you for putting this together. We've made great progress, in my view, so far. I'm grateful to all the leaders who have announced new commitments to help us meet the existential threat of climate change. This summit is a start of a road that will take us to Glasgow for the UN Climate Change Conference in November, where we're going to make these commitments real, putting all of our nations on a path to a secure, prosperous, and sustainable future. Today's final session is not about the threat of climate change poses. It's about the opportunity that addressing climate change provides. It's an opportunity to create millions of good-paying jobs around the world in innovative sectors. You know, jobs that bring greater quality of life, greater dignity to the people who are performing those jobs in every nation. For a line worker, electricians, utility workers, line transmission lines, connecting battery storage, and making our electric grid more modern. For automotive workers, building electric cars, trucks, and buses. Skilled workers installing and charging stations to accommodate them throughout our countries. Construction workers, engineers, insulators, upgrading our schools and commercial buildings and constructing new energy-efficient homes. Manufacturing workers building nuclear and carbon capture technologies, solar panels and wind turbines. And people working in the fields that we haven't even conceived of yet, on farms and on factories and in laboratories and universities, with things we haven't even thought of so far. This challenge and these opportunities are going to be met by working people in every nation. And as we transition to a clean energy future, we must ensure that workers who have thrived in yesterday's and today's industries have as bright a tomorrow in the new industries, as well as in the places where they live, in the communities they have built. When we invest in climate resilience and infrastructure, we create opportunities for everyone. That's the heart of my jobs plan that I proposed here in the United States. It's how our nation intends to build an economy that gives everybody a fair shot. As you heard in the last session, it requires investing in innovation. That's why I've asked the Secretary of Energy, my Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, who you saw earlier, to speed the development of critical technologies to tackle the climate crisis. No single technology is the answer on its own, because every sector requires innovation to meet this moment. You know, this critical effort is going to propel the most impactful breakthroughs at home and around the world and lower the cost of we're paying now for polluting the air so badly. We're going to move to net zero and a transition in all countries. And look, every country will need to invest in new clean energy technologies as we work forward and to deal with net zero emissions. I am also very proud to announce that the United States is again becoming a key leader in mission innovation. We helped launch the program during the Obama-Biden administration, a pact between the world's largest economies to ramp up investments in clean energy research and development. And today, America is once again stepping into the leadership role. We will be joining in a partner for the nations in efforts to decarbonize critical sectors across the board, including industrial sector, where we'll join with Sweden and India and leadership in the leadership group for industry transition. The power sector, where we'll work alongside of the United Kingdom to spread progress and speed it up toward a carbon-free power system, both here and around the world. And in agriculture, the agricultural sector, where we'll launch the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate with the United Arab Emirates and other partners. I'm very heartened by President Putin's call yesterday for the world to collaborate and advance carbon dioxide removal. And the United States looks forward to working with Russia and other countries in that endeavor. It has great promise. This is a moment for all of us to build better economies for our children, our grandchildren, and all of us to thrive in not just now, but beyond for next generations. Nations that work together to invest in a cleaner economy will reap rewards for their citizens. The United States is committed. We are committed to making those investments to grow our economy here at home while connecting with markets around the world. For example, we're launching a new global partnership for climate-smart infrastructure. This will create good-paying jobs here in America by supporting development of new, clean infrastructure in our partner countries. These are the sort of partnerships that are going to be good for all of us. And I think they'll have additional benefits just us working together. And today, I'm excited to welcome my counterparts in Spain, Nigeria, Vietnam, and Poland to share their thinking on how to realize the economic opportunities of the climate response. And we're going to be joined by labor and business community leaders from around the world to talk about what's happening in their communities around climate-related jobs. And I'm pleased to be joined by Secretary Buttigieg, Ambassador Tai, the National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy, the chair of my National Climate Task Force. I look forward to our conversation and making more progress throughout the day. Thank you.
Mr. President, what do you think about the Brazilian president's speech yesterday?
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Okay. Understood. I think it's me, right? Thank you, Mr. President. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Spain, Prime Minister Sanchez. The floor is yours.
Hello, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants. I thank President Biden for convening this summit, and I sincerely commend his renewed determination and commitment to the Paris Agreement and multilateralism. I fully agree that this is the only possible way to overcome what he defined yesterday as the existential threat of our time. Urgent and significant action is needed to fight the current climate emergency, and the European Union, including Spain, is, as one of its climate leaders, has been consistently working towards that goal. Delaying the ecological transition will not help us build back better later. We must use this historical opportunity to fast forward the transition towards a net zero emission future. But although $10 trillion could be mobilized globally for COVID-19 recovery, the first signs are not too encouraging. The world is calling us to act. This week, 101 Nobel laureates addressed as their call to stop fossil fuel expansion. I would like to reply to them today. Spain hears you loud and clear, and we are determined to act on it. I would like to focus on how this transition should look like. Let me share with you three messages. The first, climate action has to put people at the center. The process of decarbonization will produce winners and losers, and governments must support proactively the regions and communities negatively affected, helping transform challenges into opportunities. Investing in climate ambition and just transition policies today makes better economy and social sense. The Spanish experience shows that a just ecological transition is possible. Over the last 3 years, we have closed our mines and most of our coal power plants as part of our energy transition strategy. By 2022, we will have phased out 85% of the installed coal power generation capacity that existed in 2018. This outstanding achievement needs to be done through social dialogue. Thanks to engagements with worker unions, business organizations, and local authorities, We carried out just transition agreements in order to channel direct investments, restore declining areas, support innovative industrial projects, retrain workers, and protect small and medium enterprises. We're currently working with the affected regions to attract some of the most innovative, future-proof projects, including cutting-edge renewable energy, renewable hydrogen, or energy storage, matching both the challenges and the opportunities of this transition. The second message is that I firmly believe that the ecological transition offers extraordinary opportunities. Investing in energy transition technologies can create close to 3 times more jobs than the fossil fuels for each $1 million spent. In my country, Spain, the National Energy and Climate Plan estimates that more than 230 billion euros will be mobilized over the next decade. These private and public investments will create between 250,000 and 350,000 jobs, many of them in the manufacturing and construction sectors. Furthermore, our new COVID recovery plan will enable us to mobilize an unprecedented volume of money. We will benefit from up to 140 billion euros in transfers and loans over the next 6 years. And nearly 40% of those funds will be allocated to ecological transition-related investments. And finally, ambitious climate actions need to be anchored on a strong regulatory framework. This is why we are just approving our climate change and energy transition bill, which enshrines into law the objective of climate neutrality by 2050 and sends a strong and clear message to the market, providing legal certainty. Ladies and gentlemen, Spain has been leading by example. We have learned a lot in the process, and we are keen to share our experience because we know that addressing climate change is a global endeavor. We must act collectively, we must act now, and we must not leave anyone behind. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for sharing your work on advancing high-quality jobs within your decarbonization strategy. It is now my pleasure to introduce the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Buhari. Welcome.
Thank you. Your Excellency, President Joe Biden, Head of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my profound appreciation of the President of the United States, His Excellency Joe Biden, for convening this summit at a time the world is experiencing tremendous vulnerability from the coronavirus pandemic and climate change impacts, among several other global challenges. The issue of climate change has taken the front burner globally, as its effects can be seen and felt all around us, ranging from increased atmospheric temperature to irregular rainfall patterns, as well as sea level rise owing to the melting of glacial ice. Nigeria commends the Biden administration for the positive decision of returning the United States to the Paris Agreement. In addition to bringing about abundant green economic opportunities to the United States economy, the move further complements the larger transition process of global economies to low carbon development pathways. This summit would indeed prove instrumental in galvanizing high-level political support for the implementation of the Paris Agreement and its cut-wise rule book, as well as inviting more countries and stakeholders to take more climate-oriented responsibilities. As one of the most vulnerable nations, Nigeria is undertaking major environmentally sound and climate-friendly programs and treading the path of sustainability. Since ratifying the Paris Agreement in 2016, Nigeria has rolled out several policy enablers, set up institutional frameworks to cut emissions by 20% unconditionally and 45% conditionally, with international support by 2030. Nigeria is convinced that through net zero transition, tremendous prospects are available for job creation and other economic benefits. We are expeditiously implementing programs that stimulate gradual transition away from the use of wood stoves to kerosene, liquefied natural gas, biogas, and electricity. The immediate effects include healthy competition among private sector players, leading to higher productivity, employment, and faster service delivery. In the agricultural production and supply chain sector, we are targeting improved efficiency and productivity through the provision of accurate and timely weather forecasting to farmers, supply of drought-tolerant and early maturing crop varieties, and promoting empowerment towards the diversification of sources of livelihoods. Beyond ending gas flaring by 2030, the oil and gas sector has undertaken steps for diversification, risk management systems, insurance, hedging, research and development, and energy crisis planning. The Nigerian government in 2017 launched the Green Bond Program as part of its commitment contained in the Paris Climate Agreement signed on September 21st, 2016. The overall outcome of the highlighted actions have translated into food supply sufficiency, improved nutrition, less hunger, increased employment, more jobs opportunities, better livelihoods, reduced poverty, decreased vulnerability to health challenges, and higher quality of life. Excellencies, Nigeria calls on countries to embrace circular economy and sustainable production and consumption models in order to expedite attainment of the long-term goals of Paris Agreement. I wish Your Excellencies to reiterate Nigeria's commitment to galvanize the relevant stakeholders for climate action and our readiness to extend support to regional, continental, and global multilateral processes for the attainment of the lofty objectives of the Paris Agreement. The fight to redress the impact is the responsibility of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for highlighting the incorporation of green jobs into the recovery from the health and economic crisis in Nigeria. It is now my pleasure to introduce the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. President Phuc, we look forward to your remarks.
The Honorable Joe Biden, President of the United States of America, Excellencies, Presidents, Prime Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I thank President Biden for inviting me and other leaders to this very important summit. I commend the United States' return to the Paris Agreement. I believe that the renewed leadership and strong commitment that President Biden espoused during the opening session, combined with our shared efforts, will lead us on the path towards achieving the goals of Paris Agreement. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, climate change is undoubtedly a major existential crisis for many countries and to our planet. In Vietnam last year alone, extreme weather has taken hundreds of lives and reversed decades of progress in poverty reduction. The Mekong Delta, our rice bowl, and the home to more than 20 million Vietnamese, is suffering immensely from rising sea level, especially towards the end of this century. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, transitioning to a green net zero emission economy is an inevitable trend and imperative to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is a challenge, but will also bring about huge opportunities and benefits, including jobs, ensuring energy security, and enhancing economic competitiveness and sustainability. Vietnam resolves to follow this path. At the same time, we need a suitable roadmap for developing countries where much hardship remains. Accordingly, I wish to highlight the following points. First, transition must be just and inclusive. It must ensure equal access to opportunity, benefits, place the people at the center, and leave no one behind. It must especially be supported by the people, businesses, and scientist communities. Second, developed countries must continue to take the lead in emission reduction commitment while giving greater concrete support to developing countries, including Vietnam, in financing, in new technology development, in high quality and efficient infrastructure, and in job creation. We welcome and hope to receive the assistance from the U.S. International Climate Finance Plan and other international financial arrangements, including from international companies and corporations. Third, the pursuit of climate goals should be compatible with each country's conditions, including the need to alter their lifestyles, their modes of production, and their work. This endeavor must be integrated into national development strategies and plans. Each country must itself make efforts and make good use of international aid and resources. There need to be national mechanisms for oversight and evaluation of implementation to improve the ability to recover. Vietnam is a developing country. Our industrialization has only truly begun 3 decades ago, yet we make every effort to contribute to the global action. Vietnam has been quick to submit its NDCs to the United Nations and mainstream them into our domestic law for earnest enforcement. By 2030, we pledge to reduce emission by 9% with our domestic resources, or 27% if provided international support, bilaterally and multilaterally. We will greatly reduce coal-based power generation and increase the share of renewables in the total primary energy supply to 20% by 2030 and 30% by 2045. We will reduce greenhouse emission intensity per GDP by nearly 15% and methane emission from agricultural production by 10%. Earlier this month, Vietnam launched a program to plant 1 billion trees by 2025. This project alone is expected to absorb 2 to 3% of Vietnam's total emission by 2030. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I'm confident that the challenges of climate change shall be drivers for solidarity and positive change as we move towards COP26 in the UK and contribute to a more sustainable future for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, for sharing your thoughts on the intersection of renewable investments and job creation. It is now my pleasure to introduce the President of the Republic of Poland. President Duda, the floor is yours.
Distinguished President Biden, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, presidents, prime ministers, secretaries of state, advisors. First and foremost, let me start by thanking President Joe Biden for inviting me to the summit. Poland plays a very active role in the global climate policy. Let me just mention that it was with huge reduction surplus of CO2 that we managed to accomplish the commitments on the Kyoto Protocol from 1997. This surplus was the assumption of 6% reduction, and in our case, we managed to reduce by as many as 27% because the reduction was 33. 3 times Poland hosted climate COP conferences. In 2018, at COP24 in Katowice, we developed under the Polish leadership the Katowice Rulebook, as well as the Solidarity and Just Transition Silesia Declaration. This paved the way for the adoption of the Paris Agreement and allowed to enhance the importance of human dimension in the spirit of the principle that nobody should be left behind. The momentum given by Poland at COP24 has contributed to the European Union becoming the first global economy to adopt the goal of climate neutrality by 2050 and to further decrease its emissions by 2030 by at least 55%. Poland participates in these ambitious efforts. We are also pleased that a number of states have followed in the EU's footsteps. Let me mention that climate is the subject to which the 3C States Initiative attaches great importance. Poland is part of the 3C States Initiative, like other Central Europe countries located between the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, and the Adriatic Sea. In recent days, I talked to the presidents of Slovenia, Mr. Borut Pahor, Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, and Bulgaria, Rumen Radev, who currently holds the presidency of the 3Cs initiative. In the 3Cs region, it is clear to us that we have to implement an ambitious climate policy based on the principles of just transition, taking into account the realities of our countries and the welfare of our societies. This is a challenge, especially there where there is a need to conduct deep economic changes, including the possible closing down of certain industrial sectors, such as coal sector. These are very serious challenges for states such as Poland or Bulgaria. The climate policy is going to be the subject of our discussions during our meeting in July this year, during the summit of 3Cs in Sofia, the capital city of Bulgaria. Let me stress, however, that all of us acknowledge climate goals set by the European Union, and all of us have ambitions to implement them. Ladies and gentlemen, by pure political declarations, we're not going to change the reality. That is why Poland plans to build a new zero-emission energy system over the next 2 decades, thanks to which the share of coal is going to drop from the current 70% to as little as 11% in 2040. This is not only an answer to the agreements within the European Union, but first of all, this gives the response to the expectations of the new generation of Poles, the young generation. This week, I met the Youth Climate Council, which brings together young representatives of NGOs in Poland who fight for natural environment and climate protection. They expect the implementation of ambitious climate goals, and at the same time, they are fully aware of the fact how difficult this road is. And perhaps I'm even more satisfied to communicate to you, ladies and gentlemen, that yesterday, in Poland, in our country, we entered into an agreement after a long social dialogue between miners, coal miners, and representatives of the Polish government. This agreement respects phasing out coal from the production of electricity by 2049. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge success of the social dialogue that we've been having in Poland. This is also a great and ambitious plan for the future. If we consider that today, coal to produce electricity in Poland is about 70%. Therefore, Poland will build a sustainable low-emission energy mix based on nuclear and renewable energy, as well as gas. Unless we apply all available technologies, the transformation of our energy system will simply not be possible. Polish-US agreement on the development of the Polish civil nuclear power program dated October 2020 confirms our ambitions. It highlights the importance of international cooperation in the field of energy and climate policy. We should therefore coordinate international research and development efforts to create a critical mass of affordable technologies, innovative technologies, which are also price affordable. We should also think how central banks in our countries can support energy transformation in line with the principle of technological neutrality. A climate-friendly transition provides a huge opportunity also for our citizens and all sectors of our economy. That is the reason why Poland has placed electromobility in the center, both in public as well as in individual transport. It offers a powerful chance to develop our industry and to create new jobs. Already now, we are the biggest exporter of e-buses in the European Union, with a 46% share in the European market recorded last year. Furthermore, Poland has become a European leader in the production of lithium-ion batteries. We are ambitious also in the sector of individual transport and plans to phase out combustion engines, which I believe will open up a vast potential for cooperation on both sides of the Atlantic. We also attach considerable importance to mitigation. Polish governmental agency State Forests has implemented a pilot program of forest sinks carbon farms. It is a system aimed at using forest resources to stimulate the absorption of CO2 from the atmosphere and to accumulate it within the forest ecosystem and in wood products. The concept of forest sinks carbon farms deserves, I believe, to be legitimized as part of international legal order. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has brought the world to a halt for a moment. While getting back on the track of development, let's make sure that this is not the old track. Let us build a synergy between the following three conventions: Convention on Climate Change, on Biological Diversity, and to combat desertification. Let us use this opportunity to restore the world as a better, more just, more solidarity-based, and more sustainable place. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for sharing the role of workers, in particular within your decarbonization strategy. I would now like to recognize my good friend and colleague, the United States Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
Thank you. Thank you, President Biden, for your leadership on this defining issue of our time. Thank you, Ambassador Tai, for everything that you're doing in the U.S. and around the world. As we've just heard from these distinguished leaders, we are here to chart new paths forward to confront the climate crisis. Achieving our climate goals will create new jobs and harness the ingenuity of our industries and workers. In the U.S., the transportation sector is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases, which means that this sector has the opportunity to be among the biggest parts of the solution to climate change. The race against climate change is not just a question of what will be lost if we fail. It is about what can be gained if we succeed. For nations that successfully transition to a cleaner economy, the result will be jobs and economic growth. We are certainly recognizing that potential in the United States. President Biden recently introduced the American Jobs Plan. It represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to modernize our national infrastructure so that our economy and our climate can thrive. With its investments in electric vehicles, public transit, rail, road redesign for pedestrians, and sustainable, innovative materials, this plan will move us away from our over-reliance on fossil fuels and toward net zero carbon emissions. This plan is fundamentally an investment in our economy and our collective future. It will create millions of good jobs for the workers who will make our roads and bridges more resilient, lay new train lines, expand public transit, install electric vehicle chargers, and manufacture the vehicles that will depend on those chargers. And the majority of these new jobs will be available to workers without a degree. At least 40% of the benefits of the plan's climate investments will flow to underserved communities, which often bear the burden of transportation pollution and are at high risk of climate disruption. If our planetary warming exceeds 1.5 degrees Celsius, the impacts will be catastrophic for all of us. We still have an opportunity to prevent that if the depth of our commitment meets the urgency of this challenge before us. And that is why this gathering is so important. We are all in this together. Pursuing a net zero goal is not a zero-sum game. We all benefit if we succeed. If this pandemic has taught us anything, it's how interconnected we are and how capable we are of change. Successfully combating climate change and reaping the full economic benefits will depend not only on transportation, but on all sectors. Not only on creative ideas, but on workers literally building the future. Not only on the choices of any one nation, but on the contributions of countries all over the world. I thank President Biden and the leaders here today for meeting this moment with the urgency and courage required. Let us continue to chart this path together to the benefit of the many peoples we serve and the one climate we all share. I'm now pleased to introduce National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy, who is helping to coordinate the all-of-society approach that you will hear about in this roundtable.
Thank you for the introduction, Secretary Buttigieg, and for all of the work that you're doing. And I'm excited to have a chance to help moderate an outstanding panel of entrepreneurs and business people. So I'll keep my remarks short so we can dive right in. From the start, one of the guiding stars of our whole-of-government approach to climate action has been how we make the most of the opportunities that combating climate change actually presents to all of us. So as we work to develop our nationally determined contribution, one of the most important things was understanding how it positioned our workers and our industries to tackle the climate crisis. President Biden has always believed that tackling the climate crisis presents an incredible economic opportunity. And the fact is that creating jobs and tackling climate change actually can go hand in hand, and it must. And that's why I'm so pleased to be talking to this group today, because more than anyone else, you understand the opportunities we have to create good-paying union jobs, to improve public health, to keep our communities safe, and to advance the issue that is so important to all of us, the issue of environmental justice. And you're showing that the opportunity is already here, and it's only going to grow alongside our ambition, so long as we invest in our infrastructure, in innovation, in our workers, and in our communities. And I'm excited to hear how you are already unlocking those opportunities. So let's dive right into the conversation. So first, let me start with Sharon Burrow, the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. Sharon, you have a long history of advocating for workers around the world and have led the International Trade Union Confederation for over a decade. As the global voice for the world's working people, with over 200 million members in 163 countries, can you please share with us your vision for what ambitious climate action means for our global workforce?
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Let me congratulate President Biden for the leadership on climate. We really appreciate his commitment, not just to reduce emissions, which is vital, but to meet the climate challenge with jobs, climate-friendly jobs. This is central for a just recovery for the US, but also the foundation of a new social contract for working people and their families everywhere. Jobs, good jobs, union jobs with human and labour rights and living wages, with the freedom to organise and bargain collectively, with social protection to support people in times of crisis. That's at the heart of a just transition. To stabilise the planet with net zero economies by 2050, we all know We have to get at least half of the job done by 2030. But it cannot repeat past transitions that have left workers and their communities stranded. The labour movement fought for and won global rules for just transition, first in the ILO and then in the Paris Agreement. These mean that workers and their unions must be at the table as we plan the transition. And we know this means for every sector. The foundation is clean energy, but all technologies must be deployed in manufacturing, transport, agriculture, construction, services, and of course their supply chains. We know our cities are a vital part of the equation, and you have so many great mayors because they accept responsibility for 40% of emissions, and that the demand and supply relationships from those cities can generate sustainable production and services to fuel community renewal with decent work in rural communities in our own countries. And if global trade is reformed to meet the same sustainability standards with human and labour rights and compliance respected, indeed, around the world. As the Danish Prime Minister said, a good example of that right there in the US is the framework agreement between NAB2 and Ørsted, a Danish wind company. It will secure good paying jobs and training for hundreds of thousands of US workers. It's a great example of just transition in action. Europe, led by agreements with employers and unions in Germany, Spain, and other nations, are committed to a Green Deal with just transition, underpinned by a social pillar of rights. Canada, Scotland, New Zealand, South Africa, Kenya, Senegal, Ghana, and many others are amongst those with examples of agreements or social dialogue towards a just transition that will actually get the job done. This must be the case everywhere if we're to leave no one behind. But the good news is that for every dollar or euro or unit of currency invested in climate transition, there are jobs. 10 jobs in renewable energy generates 5 to 10 jobs in the supply chains, and up to 3 times that in economies where good wages are spent by those workers and their families. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we also need resilience, and care is vital to that. Healthcare, aged care, childcare, and education. There are even more jobs here as we build livable, caring communities. We have the technology. We have the finance to get the job done. And if we share it with developing countries, on top of vital debt relief, if every dollar of investment has an ESG lens, we will win the race for a just recovery and a sustainable future. But we need both ambition and the commitment on display here to a just transition with social dialogue in all those NDCs as we head towards the COP in Glasgow this year. I leave you with this commitment from the union movement. There are no jobs on a dead planet. We will work with everybody to build good jobs on a living planet.
Sharon, that was incredible. Your passion is infectious. So next, let me go to Brett Isaac, the CEO and co-founder of Navajo Power. Brett, Navajo Natural Resources have powered and will continue to power the growth of the American West. This administration is committed to empowering tribal leaders in our collective efforts to tackle the climate crisis. So how has Navajo Power envisioned tribal community-powered climate solutions?
Tribal nations have been at the epicenter of energy impact and want to continue being the driver of that effort through the cultivation of clean energy assets. As a developer of large-scale utility projects, Navajo Power envisions creating the opportunity to take those workforces and economies that were so crucial to advancing America's growth and re-engaging them in a new energy economy to advance clean energy growth needed to address climate impacts. We're excited to see President Biden's vision and engaging our communities in creating real, tangible solutions to address the climate crisis. The notion that this transition must be equitable to those communities who will be on the edge of this work is a large step forward to acknowledging the foundation of this movement must begin with collaboration. Tribal nations believe that, our role in this is to help accelerate, the advancement of preservation of our culture, of our resources, and of our Mother Earth. So the idea behind what Navajo Power wants to do is create the platform that's going to be the spark needed to accelerate the recovery and advancement of tribal economies. There's a lot of workforces that were built on, the previous energy economies that need this movement in order to advance and usher in a new era of energy usage and energy, resiliency. And we believe that, Navajo Power itself can play a role in creating that landing spot for job growth, for economic growth, for communities to thrive under these conditions that we're looking to create with the development of large-scale solar, wind, storage, and all the other technologies that are yet to be developed that we need in order to get to a place where we feel like our environment is protected and preserved. And so, from what we see as an important step, we thank President Biden for kind of convening this conversation because it's much overdue, but it's much needed in order for us to advance going forward. So I'm very proud that, to be here to talk about what we're doing, but also very proud to get to work under this administration's initiatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. And I know that tribal voices remain so important to us if we want to hope to lift all communities and all nations. So thank you very much for those words. Now I'm excited to hear from Nutabi Sangmusia, the CEO of Easy Solar. Great name, by the way, Easy Solar. Nutabi, the African continent currently faces a significant challenge. You have 600 million people without access to a formal grid. It also has a young and growing population. So what role can renewable energy play in accelerating both access to energy and economic livelihoods in Africa so we can ensure that no one is left behind?
Thank you so much, President Biden and Gina McCarthy and your administration for convening the summit and for having me here. As a young African woman, I'm incredibly grateful for this platform. It's a unique moment in our human story, and I want to start by taking a moment to acknowledge where we find ourselves in history. Up until recent times, when any continent has attempted to bring people into the modern economy, we've done so without concern for the planet and its limits. But here today in sub-Saharan Africa, where 75% of the world's off-grid population lives, we're being asked not to copy and paste a formula that has proven effective time and time again at industrializing and modernizing human life. We have to raise people out of poverty. We have to give people dignified work that reduces inequality, all the while not just looking at the economics, but also being conscious of the climate at the same time. Now, this may sound like an unfair conundrum, and at times I lament at the injustice of having to rise above a problem we did not create. But I do believe it's a unique opportunity to look forward rather than backwards, to challenge the status quo and say economic development does not have to be dirty, progress does not have to be recklessly unjust, that we as Africans can learn from the past while acknowledging what we have at our disposal in the present. I'm speaking to you here from Freetown in Sierra Leone. My company, Easy Solar, operates in West Africa. Our focus countries have some of the lowest rates of electrification in the world. When we first started operating 5 years ago in Sierra Leone and Liberia, it was as high as 95% of the population without power. And I mean being without power in so many more ways than one. The vast majority of people who are off-grid in Africa are based in rural communities with limited access to economic opportunities. If current trends continue, 100 million youths will be entering the African labor market, will be unemployed by 2030. This is important to me personally because I'm one of the fortunate young ones. Power only went out a few nights a week in my home when I was growing up, and I was lucky enough to have access to economic opportunity. But we cannot let Africa's future rest on luck and good fortune. And thankfully, we don't have to. And here's where my optimism comes in. Easy Solar, along with many others in the off-grid sector, are bringing power to people where they are. We're going all the way to the last mile and doing so by employing people who are from those communities. In short, we're building power from the ground up. Off-grid solar companies across Africa and mini grids are already employing as many people as traditional utility power sectors in some of the more developed markets in Africa. We heard earlier today from President Kenyatta. In Kenya, decentralized renewable energy companies are directly employing upwards of 10,000 former workers, the majority of which are based in rural areas. This figure is comparable to the number employed by the Kenyan state utilities. And here in West Africa, Easy Solar in just 5 short years has created job opportunities for 800 young and passionate people who want to contribute positively to their communities. And beyond the direct employment that we create, access to electricity generates broader economic activity. Some estimates put it as high as 5 times as many non-energy productive use jobs are created through access to electricity. So yes, we are at a unique moment in history, but we have so much more at our disposal now, and I think we can do it differently. We can power communities while providing access to good work without the negative impacts of carbon emissions that has characterized mass electrification in so many other parts of the world. I haven't spoken about it much, but I want to close off by saying I do believe there is a role for utility scale power, but we cannot overlook that decentralized renewable energy is a major part of the equation. We need firm commitments from government and the financial community to deploy the $11 billion in funding the off-grid sector needs to accelerate access to energy and economic opportunity at scale. We need to mainstream these solutions that will be a major part of wiping out energy poverty in Africa, while providing a generation of young people with good work without harming the planet. I hope you'll join me and the rest of the sector, very excited about what we're doing in expanding the good work that has already been done to leave no one behind. Thank you so much.
Nutabi, thank you so much. I think young people everywhere in the U.S. and across the world have made a vast difference in pointing out the need for urgency around climate, but also bringing such fresh energy to the table and ideas. You're right, we have to look to the future, and it's yours. And we have to play our part, so thank you for that. Now let's turn to George Oliver, the CEO of Johnson Control. Hi, George. It's good to see you. George is chairing the Energy and Environment Committee at the Business Roundtable, and he's also leading Johnson Controls, one of the leading companies in the sustainable building space. George, how do you see the outlook of business on strong climate action, and what role can buildings play in tackling the climate crisis?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. McCarthy, for leading this great discussion. And thank you, Mr. President, distinguished leaders and members of the cabinet. It is truly an honor to be here today. It is clear from the previous panelists that there are opportunities in communities, large and small, as we take action on climate, and there is a need for training to fill the good jobs being created. In my role as chairman and CEO of Johnson Controls, a global leader in smart, healthy, and sustainable buildings, we're eager to drive harder and faster to cut the 40% of greenhouse gases that come from buildings. The good news is that when we do that, the upgrades pay for themselves because we are cutting energy waste. I also have the honor of chairing the Business Roundtable Energy and Environment Committee in working with over 200 of America's largest employers from all sectors of the economy. I can tell you the CEOs recognize the threats posed by climate change. Business Roundtable members believe the risks are real, they're increasing, they are costly, and they may be irreversible. As we look ahead to COP26 in November, we have the chance to implement smart policies that ensure that all communities and workers benefit from reducing carbon emissions. Business Roundtable believes that a comprehensive market-based policy can spur innovations, ensure equity, and help avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Importantly, Business Roundtable knows that business and government must work together
and lead by example to meet the scope of the challenge. In fact, the vast majority of Business Roundtable CEOs have pledged to reduce their emissions, with nearly half committing to achieving net zero emissions in their companies by 2050 or sooner. At Johnson Controls, sustainability is our business. We committed to achieving net zero carbon before 2040 and announced science-based targets for 2030. We are proud to be ranked among the 100 most sustainable companies globally. President Biden called for 4 million buildings to be revamped. Absolutely. At Johnson Controls, we know that that can be done, and we would be foolish not to do so because inefficient buildings are a climate hazard and because money is wasted right along with energy. Working with our customers, we've cut emissions more than 30 million tons, and we have saved them $6 billion. And we guarantee the results, since we are confident substantial savings will be achieved. With digital technologies like our OpenBlue platform, we are creating not only efficient, but net zero buildings, campuses, and whole communities. So we think it is clear, driving sustainability and tackling climate change is a collective effort. At the Business Roundtable and Johnson Controls, we know that when we take this challenge on, we will cut emissions and cost, create good jobs, and build resilient, healthy infrastructure. Mr. President, we are ready to get to work. Thank you.
Well, George, thank you. It's incredible to have the Business Roundtable and your voice so powerfully partnering on this issue with us. And it means a lot, as well as your leadership at Johnson Controls. It's quite inspirational. Next, let's hear from Roxanne Brown. Hi, Roxy. It's good to see you. Roxanne is the International Vice President of the United Steelworkers. The United Steelworkers represent almost 1 million American workers in manufacturing and transportation and buildings and many other critical parts of our economy. Roxy, what can governments around the world do to ensure that we put workers right square at the center of our transition to clean infrastructure?
Thank you so much for the question, Gina, and it's so great to see you, and also great to see you as well, President Biden. It's an honor to join this summit on behalf of the 850,000 members of the United Steelworkers Union in the US and Canada. And we really commend the Biden-Harris administration for actively seeking out the voice of labor in this really important discussion. And I would say that is the first part of my answer. Governments around the world can ensure that workers are at the center of a clean energy infrastructure by simply making room for us at the table, like you did today. Oftentimes, policymakers form ideas about what they think is essential for workers in a particular state, industry, region, province, or country. But really, only workers can best answer the question of how a net zero economy includes us. And I urge leaders around the world to engage in earnest and honest conversations with workers and unions as policies are being formed, and to understand that workers are key allies in shaping and moving policy and should not be an afterthought. In your question, Gina, you mentioned the various sectors USW members are employed in, from the steel plate our members at Cleveland Cliffs in Gary, Indiana make, to the fiber optic cables our members at Corning in Wilmington, North Carolina make, to the Proterra electric buses our members in Los Angeles, California make, to the water system distribution services our members at American Water and Kokomo, Indiana provide, to the copper our members at Rio Tinto and Magna, Utah mine. USW members literally supply America every day with the components, energy, critical materials, and services for our nation's physical and social infrastructure. And we recently kicked off a campaign called We Supply America to highlight the important role our members play. They're proud to do this work. Their families depend on the good, family-sustaining union wages and benefits attached to these jobs, and communities all across this country depend on the tax base those jobs provide to help fund our schools and libraries. We must strengthen our domestic manufacturing base and support its critical workforce here at home to manufacture the next generation of these technologies. In addition to expanding and sourcing from the domestic supply chain right here, with the right policies, we can incentivize industry to decarbonize and maximize energy efficiency by investing in technologies like carbon capture, direct air capture, renewable biomass, and combined heat and power. These are all ways to ensure that workers will be at the center of US clean energy infrastructure. And I have to say, we strongly agree, President Biden, that the American Jobs Plan is a once in a generation transformational type of investment. We are ready to help pass policies like the Protecting the Right to Organize Act that will help make the new jobs of the clean energy economy family and community sustaining union jobs. We are ready to support you in helping advance and revitalize existing industries, putting workers at the center of those solutions, and build an even stronger manufacturing and energy base for generations to come. Our sleeves are rolled up, mine are, you just can't see them. Our boots are on the ground, and we are ready to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sister Roxy never fails to supply the right words at the right time. And thank you so much.
Union, not labor, union.
Union, there you go. I want to just say that these unions have not just a place at the table, but we're listening. And President Biden is making sure of that. So thank you so much, Roxy. Let's turn now to Erica Mackey, the CEO of Grid Alternatives. Erica, I had the privilege of attending 2 Grid Alternative solar installations. In fact, you had me on the roof on both of those occasions, and I talked to the job trainees learning solar skills while they were installing solar in low-income communities and communities of color in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. So how does Grid Alternatives work illustrate how clean energy can be beneficial to all individuals and families in every community?
Thank you, National Climate Advisor McCarthy. You were awesome on a rooftop. President Biden, Secretary Kerry, dignitaries, thank you for having me. Grid Alternatives' mission is to build community-powered solutions to advance economic and environmental justice through renewable energy. For the past 20 years, Grid Alternatives, the nation's largest nonprofit solar installer, has been working with communities most impacted by economic and climate injustices to bring the benefits of clean energy and jobs to all families and individuals. We will not achieve a renewable energy future without addressing the systemic injustices that have disproportionately impacted people of color. The benefits of renewable energy, clean air, long-lasting careers, lower energy bills must not be limited to the privileged. Yet, low-income communities and communities of color are usually left out of the conversations about our clean energy future, and I applaud the administration for the Environmental Justice Council. Grid Alternatives works coast to coast to push for policies that make solar energy and cutting-edge clean technologies available to everyone. By creating strong policy solutions that center the leadership of economic and environmental justice communities, we can ensure everyone benefits now and for generations to come. Clean energy can be transformative for the people, the planet, and the economy. A growing solar energy industry needs skilled workers at all levels. Solar jobs are meaningful and pay well. With Grid Alternatives hands-on training, individuals learn solar skills while participating in real-world solar installations. We make training opportunities accessible to groups that are traditionally underrepresented in solar, including women, people of color, those impacted by the criminal justice system. Our graduates jumpstart lifelong careers, connecting with employers or starting their own successful business ventures. Clean energy, together with energy storage, electrification, and other technologies, is necessary for both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. While replacing polluting energy sources, clean energy investments also benefit health. Clean energy makes us more resilient to the increasingly common disasters brought on by the climate crisis. Families depend on electricity for medical equipment and food. When the power goes out, local solar and storage can save lives. Families harmed most by fossil fuel pollution and climate destruction also pay more of their incomes for the very energy systems causing those harms, another source of economic instability. Those most impacted by fossil fuel pollution, climate-induced disasters, and burdensome energy costs must be first from climate solutions. They must benefit first, not as an afterthought. Energy agency and ownership must and can be put in the hands of communities through clean energy transition. We need to include everyone in climate solutions. We need climate justice. Grid Alternatives envisions a rapid, equitable transition to a world powered by renewable energy that benefits everyone. Our experience on the ground shows that this critical opportunity is possible with collective effort.
Done a good job.
Erica, thank you very much. I know Grid Alternatives always reminds us that clean energy is not a luxury for a few, it's a necessity for all of us, and thank you for advancing that. Now let's hear from Jack Allen, the CEO of Proterra, who I'm sure the president remembers was gracious enough to virtually host him just a few days ago. Jack, Proterra manufactures half of the U.S. electric bus market, which is pretty amazing. And as you know, funding for electric school buses is a priority in the American Jobs Plan. You know, electrifying our bus fleet is good for the planet, good for community health, and good for jobs. So what role do you see the federal government playing in spurring the demand for zero-emission electric vehicles, including school buses?
Before you talk, Jack, I want to thank you for spending some time with me. And I told you I used to drive a school bus. So I want to drive one of your electric school buses, okay? I got a license. I used to have my, anyway, okay?
That would be just great, Mr. President. And thank you, National Climate Advisor McCarthy. And of course, Mr. President, from all of us at Proterra, having the opportunity to be with you twice in 1 week is quite incredible. So thank you all very much. Now, Proterra is grateful for the government's longstanding support of electric transit buses and zero-emission transportation. We delivered our first electric transit bus over a decade ago to Foothill Transit with the support of funding from the 2009 Recovery Act. So building on these early deployments, the federal government increased support for zero-emission electric transportation through programs like the Federal Transit Administration's Low and No Emission Vehicle Program. The LONO provides funding to state and local governments to acquire zero-emission transit buses, and has been responsible for funding hundreds of electric transit buses across the nation, from Juneau, Alaska to Miami, Florida. You know, it really wasn't that long ago that the questions many were asking was whether the transit market would even move towards electrification. Well, that question's been answered. Thanks to the help of the federal government, this transition is well underway. Since Proterra's initial development over a decade ago, we've sold more than 1,000 electric transit buses. So where do we go now? Well, there's an opportunity for the federal government to go even further by spurring increased demand for commercial electric vehicles, for infrastructure, and to deepen the supply base in the United States. School buses, as you mentioned, you know, they're a great example and one of the most exciting applications for electric vehicle technology. Switching to electric school buses means cleaner air for our children and our grandchildren to breathe, and a healthier planet for them to enjoy. Yet today, unlike transit buses, school buses do not receive the same level of federal funding for electrification. So federal programs like LONO can help serve as a roadmap to accelerate the electrification of other commercial vehicles, such as electric school buses and delivery vehicles. One of the lessons that we've learned over a decade of delivering electric buses is the critical role that charging and infrastructure plays in electrification. Our customers have told us they would like to go faster towards electrification, but charging remains a barrier to EV adoption. Now, private enterprises had to solve this challenge, and we will, but it is well worthy of strong support from the federal government to prepare the nation for our clean transportation future. This includes convening public-private partnerships on charging infrastructure between the government, companies like Proterra, the fine union organizations that are represented at the summit, and electric utilities nationwide. Collectively, we can do this. Electric vehicle technology is an opportunity for the United States to be at the leading edge of the innovations that will create good American jobs, will modernize our nation's infrastructure, and help to build a more just and resilient economy. With over 600 employees nationwide, including, as Roxanne said, many represented by the United Steelworkers, we've experienced firsthand at Proterra. We believe the technologies that we need to meet global demand for zero-emission transportation can and must be built right here in the United States, including cell manufacturing. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Well, what a wonderful thrill for all of us at Proterra. Thank you.
Thank you.
George, thank you. Thank you for all of your commitment to our kids and to our cities and making the air cleaner. As a grandmother of 3 young kids, I very much appreciate it. So thank you for that. And I think, Mr. President, as you know, your American Jobs Plan is going to go all in on building the charging infrastructure that we need. That's going to allow George to expand his business and all of us to.
The guy's going to build it we're about to hear from.
All right, let's move on because I'll tell you that we want to talk to Lonnie Stevenson right now. Lonnie is the president of the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, and he is last but certainly not least because he's a major player in looking at how we can actually build his union with almost 800,000 skilled members across the wide variety of fields. They will build our country moving forward as well. Lonnie, what do energy workers need to see in order to feel really confident that they will not be left behind in a transition to cleaner power generation?
Well, thank you, Advisor McCarthy, and thank you, Mr. President. And thank you for your invitation, and thank you for hosting this event today. This is such a critical question. As you've made clear again and again, fighting climate change isn't just about cutting carbon emissions, but creating good jobs. And creating good jobs means, above all, creating union jobs. As the president of the largest energy union in all of North America, my members work in every sector that's out there, from coal and gas to wind and solar, from nuclear and power transmission and delivery. These are good union jobs, jobs that are the foundation of a strong middle class and healthy communities. It's folks like my members that are leading the clean power revolution. Keeping them at the center of the clean energy industry requires lawmakers and regulators to take some key steps. First, we must tie all federal clean energy investments, from direct infrastructure spending to tax credits, to strong labor protections. Protections like prevailing wage laws, which promote higher incomes, safer work sites, and increased productivity. Protections like Buy American provisions that make sure the push for zero carbon energy results in more domestic and manufacturing jobs, such as those that would be created by the production of HALEU fuels that are needed for the next generation of nuclear reactors. Mr. President, I know that you've laid out an ambiguous plan to build a massive network of electric vehicle charging stations with journey-level electricians who are certified by the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program. That means hundreds of thousands of good new union construction and manufacturing jobs. And protections like stronger collective bargaining rights that give all energy workers the right to freely join a union. Many existing energy jobs are good jobs for one reason, and that's because they are union jobs. But the truth is, not enough solar, wind, and other renewable power are union jobs. That's why passing the PRO Act is so important. This legislation would make it easier for workers to exercise their right to join a union of their choice, and harder for the employers to interfere with that right. I know that you support that, Mr. President, and I hope the U.S. Senate will move on it soon. We also need local hire requirements that's tied to all projects that receive federal investment. These provisions increase racial and gender diversity in the energy and construction workforce. They open the doors to good-paying union careers and secure that jobs go to those who need them the most, bringing a measure of environmental justice to communities that have paid too high a price through pollution and discrimination and now suffer from years of disinvestment. Finally, as important as solar and wind are, we must invest in all forms of carbon-free energy technologies, such as carbon capture, hydrogen, and nuclear. This isn't just good for the environment, it's good for the economy and for jobs as well. For example, IBEW members operate or maintain over 90% of the US nuclear fleet, and nuclear power plant operators are among the highest hourly wages in the United States. That's the power of a union contract. We also need to support building out our modern grid. That means doubling the transmission capacity. That means smarter neighborhood distribution systems, all interconnected by 21st century network of fiber optics. And that can double as the country's consumer broadband network. That's not only the backbone of a clean economy, it's a surefire way to create more skilled union jobs. The current energy transition can be a win for the climate and a win for jobs, as long as lawmakers commit to implementing labor protections that ensure new energy jobs are good union jobs. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build our economy back better. And the men and the women of the IBEW are ready to get working, that our nation, we can move into the clean energy future. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Thank you so much, Lonnie. And I know that between you and your 800,000 skilled members, we are going to make it in America. So I'm very excited. And Mr. President, I'm sure you'll agree this was an incredible panel. And I want to thank everybody for your passion, your inspiration, and your willingness to tell us that the future is ours if we want to grab it. And we are going to do just that. So let me turn it over now to Ambassador Tai. And again, thank you for everyone for your terrific words.
Well, thank you so much. I would like to thank President Biden, Prime Minister Sanchez, President Buhari, President Fook, President Duda, my colleagues here, Secretary Buttigieg, Advisor McCarthy, and all of our panelists today for the thoughtful and inspiring program that we've just been a part of. This week's summit underscores the reality that our time to tackle the climate crisis is now. Today's speakers have shown that taking meaningful steps to combat climate change can be a powerful driver of economic opportunity, good-paying jobs, and positive global competition. As the United States Trade Representative, my work lies at the intersection of domestic and international economic policy. I know that care and maintenance of our planet's environmental conditions are critical to our economic viability and our potential for shared prosperity. As we say, necessity is the mother of invention. The need to act on climate requires significant change, and it is already sparking innovation and opportunity. We can build on these beginnings towards a future that is cleaner and brighter, with new market opportunities and high-paying, quality jobs. And we must do so in a way that advances equity for underserved and marginalized communities. As countries around the world determine their domestic measures for decarbonization, environmental conservation, and clean energy, trade policy can be a powerful tool to create the incentives for positive competition and a race to the top in realizing our collective prosperity. Historic approaches and new initiatives, like those discussed today, and the proposals included in the American Jobs Plan, the Empowering People Clean Energy Initiative, and plans for zero-emissions transportation and transshipment, all of these clearly demonstrate that innovative and dynamic solutions are within our reach. Most importantly, today's discussion offers us hope, ideas, and an invitation to join forces to do our part, realize the goal of transitioning to net zero by 2050 in order to preserve and protect our planet and create economic opportunities for our children and their children. Now it is my pleasure to turn to Special Envoy Kerry for some final thoughts.
Before you go, John, can I add one thing to this panel, if I may? You know, every once in a while, you are confronted as a government official, a business leader, a labor leader, with a real problem. And it doesn't take you long to figure out how to turn it into an opportunity. One thing, John, everybody talked about today was, is there anything else you could think of that could create as many good jobs going in the middle of the 21st century? I mean, think about it. What else could there be that would have the opportunity to create so many jobs while doing so much good? Every single one of you, the business leaders, labor leaders, foreign leaders, foreign leaders, leaders of other parts of the world, every one of you, you talked about this in terms of jobs. It's astounding. And I think this is part of that sort of fourth industrial revolution here. This is an opportunity to, in the process this time of doing the right thing and creating jobs, of actually bringing our countries closer together. Because it is in our interest, just like, excuse the colloquial reference, but my mother would always say when something very bad would happen in our family, out of everything bad, Joe, something good will come if you look hard enough for it. Well, we're seeing that with the god-awful crisis where we lost millions of people to COVID-19. You see the collaboration we never had before, that I haven't. I've been doing this a long, long time. And it makes us realize that you can't build a wall high enough to be able to keep out whatever that next virus is. You have to take care of the virus where it originates, no matter how small the country, no matter how wealthy, no matter how poor it is. And I know that's why, for example, we're working like the devil to get to a point where we can export vaccines. But think of this as well. Every one of you, the last 2 days, have talked about the need for us to collaborate. I found it fascinating that, and I happen to agree with him, that, you know, President Putin and I have our disagreements. But he's talking about how you capture carbon from space. John, you and I have talked about that. The whole notion that it makes overwhelming sense, as much as the president of Russia and I disagree, that two big nations can cooperate to get something done, and this time get something done that benefits everybody. It's not like we're arguing whether or not one nation is going to be better benefited or worse impacted by what we do. And so I just think that if we can keep the focus on the jobs we're going to create, the economic opportunity, the growth, and in my country at least, on union jobs, to provide the ability to raise the economy, raise the GDP, raise every part of who we are. I think this is just an incredible opportunity. Incredible opportunity. I've been working with the Business Roundtable, which is, the idea of the Business Roundtable and the AFL-CIO working together when I came to politics years ago was non-existent almost. But we see the opportunities here. I hope we don't lose focus here, lose the sense of how much we can do together by helping ourselves. We're helping ourselves, we're helping others in this endeavor. It really is important. And I just want to say one thing to Bert of the Navajo Nation. Let my wife come home. She likes the Navajo Nation too much. She keeps being out there. She's out there for 2 days. She was out there before. I don't know. You know what I mean? I called her. I said, where are you? She said, oh, I'm staying another day. So, let her come home, okay? I don't want her, that's too far for me to commute. I shouldn't be so, but anyway, look, this is about what we can do together. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I don't consider you're giving me a lot of credit for convening this. I wouldn't have convened this had I not had the overwhelming help, support, and initiative from former Secretary Kerry, my good friend. He feels this in his bones. This is to him something that is consequential, and he knows a lot about it. So you're going to continue to see a lot of all of us here. But anyway, I just want to thank you, John, before this panel got shut out, because and by the way, first person I got in trouble because was Biden really going to do something about the environment? First person I went to was to Lonnie Stevenson, IBW, because I'm so sick and tired of people talking about how we get this done and don't care about jobs. And it was Lonnie stepped up, and labor stepped up, and business is stepping up. So I want to thank you. Okay, sorry, John, for being so colloquial, but thank you.
Mr. President, thank you. Thank you for your personal comments, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership, because we wouldn't be here without you having had the courage and the readiness to take this on and tackle tough issues. If I may, I just want to thank Ambassador Tai, and I want to thank Secretary Buttigieg and my cohort, my colleague from Massachusetts, Gina McCarthy. Mr. President, it is your vision that set out to convene this summit, not 100 days into your presidency. And I want to thank you for demonstrating your deep commitment to action, for bringing together so many essential voices that have been as articulate as any I've ever heard, all of whom want to do the same. And they all understand, as you have said, Mr. President, this decade, these next 10 years are the critical years. The scientists have told us unequivocally that we have about 10 years now to make the critical decisions and implement them that will avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. You said this, and that's why we're here. This has to be the decade of decision. This is the period of time. Why? Because only if we reduce sufficiently in this decade can we keep alive the vision of 1.5 degrees, and can we achieve 2050 net zero. So, Mr. President, as we approach the end of this summit, this Leaders Summit on Climate, let me again thank all of the leaders and participants who have joined us over the past few days, as well as those who are tuning in at home and all over the world. We're deeply appreciative. We're very, very grateful for your partnership, all of you, all of the countries represented here. We are going to continue these conversations over the course of the next months. We have 6 months plus to Glasgow. And as President Biden has said, and I can affirm again and again, and many of you have said to me, Glasgow is the last best hope we have to galvanize the world to move in this direction and get the job done. And what President Biden and all the rest of us hope this summit has done is shown, particularly in these last two panels, this is a plus. This is an economic bonanza. This is an opportunity to have the greatest beneficial economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution, and we've learned a lot since then. So we will continue on the road to Glasgow at the direction of President Biden. Mr. President.
Well, John, thank you. As we close this historic summit, I want to take a moment to thank the world leaders and all the participants from around the globe who have joined together to confront the existential threat of climate change. There's no threat like it. Over the last 2 days, I think we made some important progress. And in the spirit of increasing efforts to address climate change globally, we're launching an initiative to help developing countries strengthen their climate efforts while achieving their development goals. And that's going to mean money. Yesterday, I announced the United States made a new commitment under the Paris Agreement to cut our emissions by 50 to 52% by the end of this decade. And we'll get there by investing in American workers, American jobs, American infrastructure, and building a stronger and more resilient economy. We also welcome the ambitious targets announced this week by two great partners. My good friend, the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Suga, announced that Japan will cut emissions by up to 50% below the 2013 levels, almost doubling their current target. Prime Minister Trudeau, another good friend from Canada, will reduce emissions by as much as 45% below the 2005 levels. These announcements came on top of a demonstrated leadership and strong existing targets set by the European Union and the United Kingdom. And together, these commitments mean that half of the world's economy is now committed to pace the action that we need, at a pace we need, to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, an amount beyond which scientists tell us, if we've said 1,000 times, all of us could be at a point of no return. We also heard encouraging news, announcements from Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, and South Korea. And I'm looking forward to working with India's Prime Minister Modi in a new partnership to achieve our climate and energy goals, making this a core pillar of our bilateral cooperation. And the commitments we've made must become real. Commitment without us doing it, it's just a lot of hot air, no pun intended. You know, we must implement these commitments, accelerate them, and innovate and invest in order to reach them. And we need to work together, once again, to build a clean energy future that delivers good jobs and overcomes the threat of climate change. Investing in innovation and in our people, raising our ambitions, ensuring every nation does its part. And we'll meet again in Glasgow in November for the UN Climate Conference. I believe we're going to meet those moments. I think we're going to meet the moment that we've all been talking about, to make this commitment and to keep the commitment. It's an economic imperative. I think it's a moral imperative to future generations. Here in America, there's never been a challenge we couldn't meet if we put our minds to it and did it together. I hope your countries feel the same way. I know we can do this. I know we can do this. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for joining the summit. And thank you for stepping up to confront this crisis before it's too late. I know we can seize the opportunities of a cleaner, stronger, and more resilient economy and deliver the benefits to people in each of our nations. So I look forward to working alongside you to confront the climate crisis, to build a better world for all of our children and grandchildren. We're going to do this together. Thank you all, and may God bless you, and let's get to work. Thanks again. Thanks, everybody.
We know the kind of world we want. Healthier, safer, more sustainable, equitable, where nature thrives, communities are healthy, and opportunities are plentiful. We know we can create this world. The challenge is profound, and we must move faster than ever before. but the world is ready for action. We can limit climate change with a singularity of purpose. Every nation united in commitment, ready to measure success with progress, not promises, and ensure that when the story of our time is written, we will have met this moment.
We can do this. We must do this, and we will do this.
The time for action is now.